never should have opened that niche, but the work order said it needed restoration. My name is Vance Holloway, and I have worked as a niche wall restoration specialist at Riverside Memorial Gardens in Portland, Oregon for 16 years. In that time, I've replaced hundreds of bronze plaques, repaired cracked marble facings, and resealed compartments that had weathered decades of rain and neglect. The work is methodical, quiet, and predictable. You learn to respect the silence of columbarium walls. They hold grief in perfect geometric rows, each plaque a small door to someone's final resting place. That silence is supposed to be unbroken. The job came in on a Tuesday morning, row 7, unit 12, a 1942 bronze plaque showing significant corrosion, family requesting full restoration. The paperwork listed the deceased as Helen Marion Croswell, aged 68 at time of death, cremated March 4th, 1942. I'd worked that wall before, pre-war installations, solid craftsmanship, but the bronze had suffered from decades of coastal moisture. I arrived at 6 in the morning when the gardens were still empty. The columbarium stood in the oldest section, a 3-story granite structure with over 2,000 niches. I set up my equipment, laid out my tools on a clean tarp, and began the careful work of removing the plaque. The screws came out easily enough. I photographed the engraving for the restoration shop, then set the plaque aside. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound, rhythmic, deliberate, coming from inside the sealed compartment. I stopped moving, listened. The sound continued. Tap, 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 like fingernails on glass, though the urn would be ceramic or metal. I checked my phone. No notifications, no construction nearby. The gardens were silent except for distant bird song and that impossible tapping. I told myself it was settling. Old buildings make noise, thermal expansion, something logical, but the rhythm was too precise. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. I should have walked away, called my supervisor, followed protocol. Instead, I leaned closer to the open compartment, peering into the darkness. The urn sat exactly where it should be, a simple brass vessel, tarnished but intact, resting on a small marble shelf. Nothing appeared disturbed. The tapping stopped. I exhaled slowly, feeling foolish. I reached for my flashlight to inspect the interior before resealing. Standard procedure: check for moisture damage, verify the urn's stability, document any issues. The beam illuminated the urn's surface, and I saw the pattern. The ashes, somehow, impossibly, had escaped the sealed urn and arranged themselves on the marble shelf in a perfect spiral pattern. The design was deliberate, mathematical, flowing outward from the urn's base in a clockwise rotation. Fine gray ash formed lines so precise they looked drawn with a compass. My hands started shaking. I stepped back from the wall, nearly tripping over my toolbox. The spiral couldn't exist. The urn was sealed. I could see the lid's wax seal still intact. But the ashes covered the shelf, the back wall of the compartment, even climbing slightly up the interior sides in that same spiraling pattern. I grabbed my camera and took 6 photographs. My breath came quick and shallow. I needed evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Then the tapping started again. This time, it came from inside the urn itself, louder now, more insistent. The brass vessel sat motionless, but the sound was undeniable. Something moving within, something tapping against the metal from the inside. Tap, tap, tap. I watched the urn. It didn't move. The lid remained sealed, but the tapping continued, and now I could see fine vibrations in the ash spiral, tiny disturbances rippling outward from the center, as if responding to whatever moved inside. Mrs. Croswell? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The tapping stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt worse than the sound. I stood there, frozen, staring into that open compartment at an urn that shouldn't be making noise and ashes that shouldn't have formed patterns. The morning sun hadn't yet reached this side of the columbarium. Shadows filled the granite alcoves. I became aware of how alone I was, surrounded by thousands of urns in their individual niches, each one sealed behind bronze and marble. How many others had patterns I couldn't see? My phone buzzed, a text from my supervisor asking for a progress update on the Croswell restoration. I typed back with trembling fingers. Complications. Need to document unexpected conditions. Will call soon. I looked back at the niche. The ash spiral remained, undisturbed now, perfect in its geometric precision. I took 3 more photographs. Then carefully, quietly, I began gathering my tools. The plaque could wait. The restoration could wait. I sealed the compartment temporarily with a clean panel and backing screws, working as quickly as my shaking hands allowed. The entire time, I listened for that tapping sound. It didn't return. But as I tightened the final screw, I heard something else, a soft exhalation, like breath released after holding it too long. It came from inside the wall, from multiple niches, a chorus of quiet sighs. I left my equipment. I'd come back for it later, during daylight, with another person present. I walked to my truck without looking back at the columbarium, though I felt the weight of those niches watching me leave. 2,000 small doors, 2,000 sealed compartments, and behind one of them, ashes that had learned to move. The photographs are stored on my laptop. I've never shown them to anyone. The restoration was eventually completed by another specialist, and the Croswell family received their refinished plaque. I still work at Riverside Memorial Gardens, but I refuse assignments on that particular wall. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder about the spiral pattern, what it meant, what it was trying to say. But mostly I try not to think about the tapping, or the way it stopped when I spoke her name, or the question that keeps me awake. If ashes can move behind sealed bronze, what else might they do when no one's watching? Row 7, Unit 12. I walk past it every day. I never look directly at it, and I never, ever work alone anymore. There are things you find behind walls that were never meant to be there. My name is Maya Trentwood, and I have worked as a columbarium wall technician at Greenfield Memorial Park in Sacramento, California for 11 years. My job involves structural repairs, plaque replacements, and facade restoration on niche walls that date back to the 1930s. The work requires precision, patience, and a certain comfort with silence. You learn to see these walls not as monuments to the dead, but as architecture, marble, bronze, concrete, sealant. You focus on the mechanics of preservation, not the weight of what you're preserving. That approach kept me sane until I opened Unit 14C. The project was straightforward. Row 14 had significant cracking in the marble facings. Thermal stress from decades of valley heat had caused the stone to fracture in several locations. The cemetery board approved a full restoration of the affected row, remove damaged facings, inspect the structural integrity of each niche, replace the marble, reseal, and reinstall the plaques. Standard work. I'd done similar jobs on at least 20 other walls. I started with Unit 14A on a Wednesday morning. The plaques came off clean. The niches behind them were dry, properly sealed, urns sitting exactly where they should be. I worked methodically through B, C, D, documenting everything with photographs and condition reports. By noon, I'd reached 14C. The plaque read, Margaret Louise Hoffman, beloved wife and mother, June 3rd, 1921 to October 9th, 1978. The bronze had weathered well. I removed the mounting screws, photographed the engraving, and carefully lifted the plaque away from the marble facing. The facing itself had a vertical crack running through the center. I'd need to remove it entirely to assess the damage. I used a thin pry bar to loosen the marble from its adhesive backing, working slowly to avoid further fracturing. The piece came away in two clean halves. Behind it, wedged in the space between the official urn and the back wall of the compartment, was a second urn, smaller, unmarked, covered in dust. I set down my tools and stared at it. The official urn, Margaret Hoffman's urn, sat centered on its marble shelf, exactly as it should be. But this second vessel, maybe 8 inches tall, plain ceramic with a simple lid, had been hidden in the narrow gap behind the first urn, deliberately placed, deliberately concealed. I pulled out my phone and took 6 photographs from different angles. Then I carefully reached into the compartment and lifted the smaller urn out into the light. It was heavier than I expected. The ceramic was cold to the touch, unglazed, with no markings or inscriptions of any kind. No name, no dates, nothing to indicate whose ashes it held. My supervisor needed to see this. I called the main office. It's Maya. I'm on row 14, and I just found an unregistered urn behind the Hoffman plaque. No documentation, no name. I need you to check the records. There was a long pause. Then, stay there. I'm coming down. Director Reeves arrived within 10 minutes. I'd worked with him for 8 years. A calm, professional man who'd spent 30 years in cemetery management. Nothing rattled him. He'd seen misplaced urns, paperwork errors, family disputes over cremains. He approached every situation with measured composure, but when I showed him the photographs on my phone, his face went pale. That's not possible, he said quietly. It's right there. You can see it yourself. He moved closer to the open niche, peering inside at the space where the small urn had been hidden. He didn't touch anything, just stared. I watched his jaw tighten, watched him swallow hard. "Show me the urn," he said. I handed it to him. He turned it over in his hands, examining every inch of the surface. No markings, no identification. He tried the lid. It came off easily, revealing ash gray contents within. Human cremains, without question. The Hoffman urn was installed in 1978, Reeves said, his voice carefully controlled. Single niche, single occupant. The records are clear. One urn, one set of remains. This, he held up the unmarked vessel. This shouldn't exist. Could it be a record keeping error? Maybe family added it later? No, these compartments are sealed after installation. You need tools and authorization to open them. If someone had accessed this niche after 1978, there would be documentation, work orders, signatures. We keep everything. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I heard him ask for the Hoffman file, requesting the original interment paperwork, the family contact information, any subsequent access records. While he waited, I examined the niche more carefully. The dust pattern on the shelf told a story. The official urn had a clean circle beneath it, regular cleaning and maintenance over 40-some years. But the space where the smaller urn had been wedged showed undisturbed dust accumulation. Thick, decades old. Whatever that urn was, it had been there since the beginning. Reeves ended his call and looked at me. Margaret Hoffman, survived by husband James and daughter Susan. James died in 1991, cremated, interred at a different cemetery. Susan moved to Arizona in '83. No contact with the cemetery since the original internment. No record of anyone accessing this niche after the initial installation. So this urn has been hidden here for over 40 years, at least. Why would someone hide cremains in someone else's niche? Reeves didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the unmarked urn in his hands, turning it slowly. "The weight is wrong," he said finally. "This is heavier than standard cremains, significantly heavier." The morning had turned hot. The sun beat down on the columbarium courtyard. But standing there with that unmarked urn between us, I felt cold. "We need to document this properly," Reeves said. "Photographs, measurements, then we seal this back up, and I contact the state cemetery board. This is beyond my authority." I took detailed photographs while Reeves held the urn. Every angle, the compartment, the dust patterns, the official Hoffman urn still sitting undisturbed on its shelf. Then we carefully placed the unmarked vessel back into its hiding spot, wedged exactly where we'd found it. As I positioned the last piece back into place, I noticed something I'd missed before. Scratched into the ceramic on the base of the small urn, almost invisible in the dim light of the compartment, were 3 words in crude, hasty letters: "The one forgotten." I showed Reeves. He read the words. His hands trembled slightly. "Put it back," he whispered. "Put it back exactly where it was." I did. We reinstalled the cracked marble facing, reattached the bronze plaque, and sealed Unit 14C. The repair could wait for another day. Reeves took the photographs back to his office. He filed a report with the state board. I never heard what came of it. I finished the restoration project 3 weeks later, replaced all the damaged facings on row 14, resealed every compartment. The work was clean, professional, thorough, but I never opened 14C again. When I reached that unit, I simply repaired the exterior facing without removing the plaque. Sometimes I think about that small urn, still hidden behind Margaret Hoffman's remains. I think about the weight, too heavy to be ash alone. I think about those scratched words, the one forgotten. But mostly I think about how many other rows I've worked on over 11 years, how many thousands of niches I've repaired and resealed, and I wonder what else might be hidden behind those bronze plaques. What other forgotten ones might be wedged in spaces they were never meant to occupy, waiting in the dark for someone to finally remember them. I still work at Greenfield Memorial Park. I still repair columbarium walls. But now, whenever I remove a plaque, I check the space behind the official urn. I check carefully, every single time. I haven't found another one yet, but I know it's only a matter of time. Some faces follow you even when they shouldn't be able to move. My name is Davis Kellerman, and I have worked as a restoration lead for Heritage Columbarium Services in Charleston, South Carolina for 22 years. We specialize in historical niche wall preservation, cleaning oxidized bronze, repairing damaged stone, maintaining the structural integrity of columbariums that date back over a century. The work connects me to history in a way few other professions can. Each plaque tells a story. Each engraved face represents a life fully lived and carefully remembered. I've restored thousands of portraits over the years, treating each one with the reverence it deserves. Until I worked on the Ashford plaque, I never questioned whether any of them looked back. The job came through our usual channels. Magnolia Rest Cemetery needed restoration work on their oldest columbarium section, built in 1952, significant weathering on the bronze plaques, several requiring complete refurbishment. The Ashford plaque was among them. Edward James Ashford, August 12th, 1897 to March 19th, 1952. The bronze had developed deep corrosion around the engraved portrait, a detailed profile of a stern-looking man with prominent features and deep-set eyes. I removed the plaque on a Thursday morning and transported it to our workshop for cleaning and re-engraving. Standard procedure. The workshop is climate-controlled, well-lit, equipped with every tool needed for precision restoration work. I set the Ashford plaque on my primary workbench and began the careful process of chemical cleaning. That's when I first noticed the eyes. They seemed to be looking slightly to the left in the engraving, toward the window. I'd worked with portrait plaques before. Usually, the engraver positions the face straight on or in a formal three-quarter profile. This one was definitely oriented left. I thought nothing of it. Cleaned the corrosion, polished the surface, re-engraved the damaged lettering. The work took most of the day. Around 4 in the afternoon, I stepped back to photograph the finished restoration. The eyes were looking to the right now, toward the door. I blinked, looked again. The portrait was definitely oriented right. The subtle turn of the head, the direction of the gaze, all of it pointed right instead of left. I told myself I'd remembered wrong. Memory plays tricks after hours of detailed work. Eye strain causes distortion, perfectly logical. I compared the cleaned plaque to my initial photographs, the ones I'd taken before starting the restoration work. In the original photographs, Edward Ashford's engraved face was looking left. On my workbench, the face was looking right. I picked up the plaque, turned it over in my hands, examined every angle under direct light. The bronze was solid, the engraving unchanged from when I'd finished the restoration, but the direction of the portrait's gaze had shifted. I set it back down carefully, rubbed my eyes, stepped away from the workbench, made coffee, came back, still looking right. I needed a reference point, something definitive. I contacted Magnolia Rest Cemetery and requested the original installation photographs from 1952. They keep meticulous records. Every plaque photographed at time of installation for documentation purposes. The archivist sent over a scanned image within an hour. In the 1952 installation photograph, Edward Ashford's portrait faced directly forward, neutral, centered, not left, not right, which meant the face had changed twice, once before I'd ever touched it, once while it sat on my workbench. I should have refused to continue, should have called my supervisor and explained the situation. But after 22 years in restoration work, you develop a certain professional pride. You finish what you start. You don't let irrational fears compromise the quality of your work. I placed the plaque in storage overnight and went home. Told myself it would make sense in the morning. Some artifact of the engraving process. Some optical illusion I was misinterpreting. The next morning, I arrived early to the workshop. The Ashford plaque was exactly where I'd left it, in the secure storage cabinet, wrapped in protective cloth. I unwrapped it carefully. The eyes were looking straight at me now, dead center, directly forward, exactly as they appeared in the 1952 photograph. My hands started shaking. I set the plaque down on the workbench and stepped back. The workshop was empty except for me. Early morning light filtered through the windows. Everything else was normal, orderly, exactly as it should be. But that engraved face was staring straight ahead where it had been looking right the previous afternoon. I watched it for 5 minutes, didn't blink, didn't look away. The face remained motionless, frozen in bronze, eyes forward. An engraved portrait, nothing more, nothing less. Except it had moved multiple times, and I had photographic evidence. I pulled up the images on my computer, organized them chronologically. Installation photo from 1952, facing forward. My initial assessment photo from yesterday morning, facing left. My finished restoration photo from yesterday afternoon, facing right. And this morning, in front of me, facing forward again. 4 different orientations. The same engraved bronze plate. I took another photograph, dated and time-stamped, facing forward. Then I wrapped the plaque and placed it back in storage. I told my supervisor I needed to run tests on the bronze composition, that something about the Ashford restoration wasn't sitting right with me. He approved the delay. Over the weekend, I researched Edward Ashford, found his obituary in the Charleston archives. Prominent local attorney. Died suddenly of heart failure, survived by wife Helen and son Edward Jr., known for his piercing gaze and commanding presence in the courtroom. Piercing gaze. The obituary specifically mentioned his eyes. Monday morning, I returned to the workshop early, unwrapped the plaque, facing forward, exactly as I'd left it. I set it on the workbench and positioned my camera on a tripod, pointed directly at the plaque. Then I started the time-lapse function, one photograph every 30 seconds for the next 8 hours. I left the workshop, went to handle other projects, checked back at noon. The plaque still faced forward. Checked again at 3 in the afternoon, still forward. At 5:30, I stopped the time lapse and reviewed the footage. 676 photographs total. I went through them frame by frame. In frame 342, taken at approximately 1:15 in the afternoon, the eyes were looking left. They stayed left for 6 frames, 3 minutes, then they returned to center. I watched it happen in the photographs, a gradual shift, the engraved lines reconfiguring, the portrait's gaze moving from forward to left, holding, then shifting back to forward, all while the workshop was empty, all while no one was there to witness it except the automated camera. I backed up the files immediately, printed the keyframes, documented everything. Then I wrapped the Ashford plaque one final time and called Magnolia Rest Cemetery. The restoration is complete, I told them, but I need to install it personally, and I need to see the niche compartment before I seal it. They agreed. The next morning, I returned to Magnolia Rest with the restored plaque. A cemetery worker met me at the columbarium. We walked to the Ashford niche together. He removed the temporary seal. The compartment was empty except for the urn. Standard brass vessel, properly sealed, nothing unusual, except for the way the dust had settled on the marble shelf. It formed a pattern, dozens of small finger-shaped marks, as if something had been touching the back wall repeatedly, reaching, pressing against the stone. I installed the plaque quickly, sealed it with industrial adhesive, tip back. Through the polished bronze surface, Edward Ashford's engraved portrait stared straight ahead, neutral, centered, exactly as it should be. But I swear I could feel the weight of his gaze tracking me as I walked away. I still work restoration, still clean, and repair bronze plaques. But I don't keep them in the workshop overnight anymore. I finish the work in one day and return them immediately to their niches. And I never, ever use time-lapse photography again. Some things aren't meant to be documented. Some faces should only move when nobody's watching. And some questions, like why Edward Ashford's portrait can't seem to settle on a direction, or what those finger marks on his marble shelf mean, are better left unanswered. The plaque is still installed at Magnolia Rest. Row 9, Section B. Sometimes I drive past the cemetery on my way home. I never stop. I never look directly at that section of wall, but I always check my rearview mirror to make sure nothing's following me. Old habits from 22 years in this work. You learn to pay attention to what's behind you, especially when you've seen what can happen to a face that's supposed to stay still. Some confessions are never meant to be found. My name is Ronan Pierce, and I have worked as a niche installation specialist at Elmwood Memorial Gardens in Traverse City, Michigan, for 14 years. My responsibilities include plaque mounting, engraving repair, and structural maintenance on our 3 columbarium walls. The job requires precision and respect. These walls hold people's loved ones, and every detail matters. You learn quickly that families remember how their plaque looked, where it was positioned, what the engraving said. Everything is scrutinized. Everything is permanent until you find something that was supposed to stay hidden. The work order was simple enough. Section C, Row 6, Unit 9, a 1987 installation showing significant wear on the bronze plaque. The family had contacted us about re-engraving the text. Decades of Michigan winters had caused the letters to fade. Standard restoration. I'd done hundreds of similar jobs. The plaque read, Margaret Ann Holloway, loving mother, April 7th, 1923 to November 10th, 1987. The bronze had weathered poorly. Deep oxidation around the edges. The engraved text was barely legible in places. I carefully removed the mounting screws and lifted the plaque away from the niche facing. That's when I saw the paper, a small square of notebook paper, folded tight, wedged into the narrow gap between the marble facing and the niche frame. Yellowed with age, the edges were crisp, undisturbed by moisture. It had been there since installation, 36 years, protected by the sealed plaque. I should have left it, should have recognized that something deliberately hidden should stay that way. But curiosity is a hard instinct to ignore. I pulled the paper free with careful fingers and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, precise, written in blue ink that had faded to gray. She asked me not to cremate her. I did it anyway. I'm sorry, Mom. I read it 3 times. My hands went cold. The note was short, direct. A confession pressed into a space where it would never be seen unless someone removed the plaque. Someone like me. I looked at the urn sitting in its compartment, standard brass vessel, sealed, holding the cremated remains of Margaret Holloway, who, according to this note, had not wanted to be cremated. I needed to verify the handwriting. We keep all original interment paperwork on file, family authorizations, cremation permits, installation requests. Everything signed and documented. I pulled out my phone and photographed the note, then carefully refolded it and placed it in my pocket. Back at the office, I requested the Holloway file. The cemetery director brought it out personally, a thick folder with paperwork dating back to 1987. I found the cremation authorization form quickly. Standard document, signature at the bottom. I pulled out the folded note and compared the handwriting. Identical, the same precise letters, the same slant, the same pressure. Whoever had signed the cremation authorization had also written the confession. Whoever had legally approved Margaret Holloway's cremation had known she didn't want it. I showed the director, explained where I'd found the note, watched his expression shift from curiosity to discomfort to something harder to define. This is a family matter, he said quietly. We processed the cremation legally. The authorization was signed. Everything was in order. But the note? The note is between that person and their mother, not our concern. Shouldn't we contact the family? Let them know? He looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Pierce, what exactly would we tell them? That we found a private note hidden behind their mother's plaque? A note that questions a decision made 36 years ago by someone who's likely dead themselves? What purpose would that serve except to cause pain? I didn't have an answer. He was right. The note was old. The decision was final. Margaret Holloway's ashes had rested in that niche for over 3 decades. Whatever objection she'd had to cremation, whatever her child's guilt about overriding that wish, it was long past the point where anything could be changed. But I couldn't let it go. I researched Margaret Holloway's family, found her obituary from 1987, survived by son David Holloway, only one child listed. I found David in the records. He died in 2003, also cremated, interred in Section B. Different columbarium wall, but the same cemetery. I visited his niche on my lunch break. Simple plaque. David Thomas Holloway, beloved son, February 12th, 1948 to June 6th, 2003. No mention of mother or father, no additional inscriptions. I stood there for a long time, looking at that plaque, thinking about the note in my pocket, thinking about David signing his mother's cremation authorization while knowing she didn't want it, thinking about him writing that confession and hiding it where only chance would ever reveal it. What had happened? Medical emergency requiring quick decisions, financial constraints, family disagreements, or something darker, a willful violation of her wishes, guilt festering for 16 years until his own death. I'd never know. The note didn't explain, it only confessed. I finished the Holloway plaque restoration 3 days later, re-engraved the faded text, polished the bronze until it gleamed. When I returned to install it, I brought the note with me. I stood at the open niche, holding the folded paper, debating. The ethical thing was probably to destroy it. Let David's confession stay secret. Let Margaret rest without anyone knowing about the conflict between her wishes and her cremation. But something stopped me. Some instinct that the note meant something, that it had been placed deliberately, not just hidden, but preserved. Confession requires witness. Maybe David wanted someone to find it eventually. Maybe that was part of the penance. I placed the note back exactly where I'd found it, wedged it into the gap between the marble facing and the frame. Then I mounted the restored plaque, sealed it tight, and stepped back. The work was clean, professional. The family would be pleased with how the engraving looked. They'd never know about the note hidden behind it. No one would know unless they removed the plaque again, maybe another 30 or 40 years from now. I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd done my job, preserved someone's private confession, and could move on to other projects. But that night, I started having dreams. I'm standing in front of Margaret Holloway's niche. The plaque is open. The urn is there, but it's not sealed properly. The lid is slightly askew, and from inside the urn, I hear a voice, quiet, restrained, but insistent. I asked him not to. The dreams continued for 2 weeks, always the same, always her voice from inside the urn, repeating those 5 words. I asked him not to. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was guilt or stress or my subconscious processing the ethical complexity of what I'd found. but the dreams felt too specific, too directed, like she was actually speaking to me, actually asking me to understand. On a Saturday morning, I returned to the cemetery alone, brought my tools, removed the Holloway plaque again, retrieved the note. This time, I brought it to the cemetery director. I can't keep this hidden, I said. I don't know who needs to see it, but someone does. Maybe we contact distant family. Maybe we add a note to the file, but it shouldn't stay secret. He read the note again, sighed. I'll add it to the permanent file, document where it was found. If any family members ever inquire about Margaret Holloway's interment, we'll have this context available. That seemed right. Official. Witnessed. I reinstalled the plaque without the note. The niche looked the same as it always had. Margaret Holloway's urn rested undisturbed on its marble shelf. The brass gleamed in the late morning sun. That night, the dreams stopped. I still work at Elmwood Memorial Gardens, still restore plaques and maintain columbarium walls. But now, whenever I remove a plaque for any reason, I check the hidden spaces carefully. The gaps, the crevices, the places where someone might fold a small confession and tuck it away. I've found 4 more notes since Margaret Holloway's. Different handwriting, different confessions. Each one carefully hidden behind bronze and marble, waiting for someone to witness what was done. I document them all now, add them to permanent files, give the dead a voice that extends beyond their sealed urns. Because some things shouldn't stay hidden. Some confessions deserve to be heard, even if they can never be forgiven. And some voices keep speaking long after the ashes have gone cold, waiting for someone to finally listen and understand what they were trying to say all along. Unit 9 still holds Margaret Holloway's urn. The plaque is sealed. The engraving is clear and beautiful. Her son David rests 3 walls over, both of them quiet now. But I know what she asked for. I know what he did instead. And I know why he hid that note, where only chance or routine maintenance would ever reveal it. Confession requires witness. He found his, and now so has she. Some sounds don't need a source to be real. My name is Iris Caldwell, and I have worked as a niche maintenance specialist at Cornerstone Memorial Park in Boise, Idaho for 9 years. My responsibilities center on preservation, replacing deteriorated sealants, monitoring for moisture damage, ensuring the structural integrity of our columbarium walls. The work is quiet, methodical, almost meditative. You develop a rhythm, inspect, document, repair, move to the next unit. Most days, the only sounds are my footsteps on the concrete walkway and the distant hum of lawn equipment. Until I started working on Section 3, Row 2, Unit 9, I'd never heard anything that shouldn't be there. The job was routine. The sealant around Unit 9 had deteriorated significantly, common in our climate with its temperature extremes. I'd been tasked with removing the old compound, cleaning the surfaces, and applying fresh, industrial-grade sealant. Standard procedure. I'd done the same repair on over 200 niches. I arrived at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. The columbarium courtyard was empty. Early fall air, cool and still. I set up my equipment, laid out my tools, and began scraping away the old sealant from around the plaque frame. That's when I heard the hum, low frequency, barely audible, like an electrical transformer or distant machinery. But we don't have electrical systems running through the columbarium walls. No wiring, no mechanical components, just marble, bronze, and the sealed compartments behind them. I stopped working, listened carefully. The hum continued, steady, unchanging, emanating from somewhere close. I checked my phone, turned it off. The sound persisted. I walked around the immediate area, trying to locate the source. The hum seemed strongest directly in front of Unit 9. I pressed my ear against the sealed plaque. The sound was definitely coming from inside the niche. I should have called maintenance, should have reported an unexplained anomaly before proceeding. But after 9 years of this work, you develop a certain confidence, probably just thermal expansion, metal contracting, stones unsettling, missing with a logical explanation that would become obvious once I opened the compartment for repair. I removed the plaque carefully. The screws came out clean. I photographed the interior before beginning work, standard documentation protocol. The urn sat centered on its marble shelf, a simple brass vessel with a sealed lid. Everything appeared normal, except for the hum, which was louder now with the plaque removed. The sound was definitely coming from the urn itself. I set my camera aside and leaned closer, trying to understand what I was hearing. Not electrical, not mechanical, something organic about the tone, a resonance that felt almost vocal, though not quite human, like a single sustained note held indefinitely without breath. The urn was labeled Patricia Ann Morrison, March 2nd, 1932 to July 18th, 2006. 14 years since her cremation, long enough for any systems or processes to have ceased. Nothing should be generating sound after that much time. I reached into the compartment to check the urn's stability. The moment my fingers made contact with the brass surface, the humming stopped. Immediate silence, so abrupt it felt like a physical change in pressure. I pulled my hand back, waited. The sound didn't return. I touched the urn again. My fingers registered heat, not the ambient temperature of the marble compartment, but genuine warmth, like touching skin that had been in sunlight. Impossible for a brass vessel that had been sealed in a temperature-controlled niche for 14 years. I jerked my hand away. The warmth lingered on my fingertips. I stepped back from the open niche, my breath coming faster. The courtyard was still empty. The morning light had strengthened, illuminating the rows of bronze plaques in clean geometric lines. Everything looked exactly as it should, except the urn in Unit 9 was warm, and it had been making a sound that stopped the moment I touched it. I pulled out my phone and called my supervisor. I need someone to witness something. Unit 9, can you come down here? What's wrong? I need you to see this, please. He arrived within 10 minutes. Bill Carson, 30 years in cemetery management, calm and practical. I explained what I'd heard, explained the warmth. He listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. Show me, he said. We approached the open niche together. The urn sat undisturbed on its shelf. Bill reached in and touched the brass surface, held his hand there for several seconds. "It's warm," he said quietly. "You feel it too?" "Definitely warmer than it should be." He withdrew his hand and pulled a small infrared thermometer from his tool belt, standard equipment for checking cold storage temperatures. He aimed it at the urn. The display read 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Body temperature, exactly body temperature. Bill lowered the thermometer. We stood there in silence, staring at that brass urn, maintaining the temperature of living human tissue 14 years after the person it contained had died. "Did you hear any sound?" I asked. "No, just silence." "It was humming before, I swear, a low hum coming from inside. It stopped when I touched the urn." Bill aimed the thermometer at different parts of the niche. The marble shelf read 62 degrees. The back wall of the compartment read 61. The surrounding air in the courtyard read 58. Everything normal except the urn itself, radiating heat that had no possible source. "We need to open it," Bill said. "What?" "The urn. We need to verify the contents, make sure nothing's decomposing or generating heat through some biological process. The seal looks intact." "I know, but we need to be sure." We documented everything with photographs and temperature readings. Then Bill carefully lifted the urn from its shelf and brought it out into the sunlight. The brass was warm to the touch, not hot, not uncomfortable, but distinctly above ambient temperature. He examined the seal, undisturbed, no cracks or gaps. He twisted the lid. It came off smoothly, the seal breaking with a soft pop. Inside, ash, gray cremains, exactly what should be there. No decomposition, no organic matter, no obvious source of heat, just the standard remains of a cremated body, looking exactly as they should after 14 years. Bill used a long probe to carefully stir the ashes, checking for any anomalies. Nothing. He took the urn's internal temperature, 98.6 degrees. The ashes themselves were warm. "This isn't possible," Bill said, more to himself than to me. "Cremains don't generate heat. There's no biological process, no chemical reaction. This shouldn't exist." He sealed the urn carefully and returned it to the niche shelf. We took more photographs, documented every measurement. Then we stepped back and stared at Unit 9, trying to make sense of what we'd just witnessed. The humming started again. Quiet, low, the same sustained tone I'd heard before. Bill heard it this time too. I could see it in the way his posture changed, the way his eyes widened. "That's coming from the urn," he whispered. "I know. But it's sealed. The ashes can't produce sound." "I know." We listened for 3 minutes. The hum never wavered, never changed pitch or volume, just a steady, impossible vibration emanating from cremated remains that had been dead for 14 years. Bill pulled out his phone and recorded the sound. The audio file captured it clearly, a low-frequency tone that shouldn't exist. He played it back. The recording was perfect, undeniable. "We seal this back up," Bill said finally. "We document everything we found, and we monitor it. If the sound continues or the temperature changes, we'll have to contact the family and—" He stopped. "And tell them what?" That their mother's ashes are warm and humming? I didn't answer. There was no good answer. We replaced the plaque together, sealed it carefully. The sealant work I'd been hired to do could wait for another day. We walked back to the office in silence, the recording of that impossible hum stored in Bill's phone. I returned to Unit 9 the next morning, brought fresh sealant and my full toolkit. Before starting work, I removed the plaque again and checked the urn with the infrared thermometer. 98.7 degrees. The humming was quieter now, but still present. I touched the urn again. The warmth transferred to my fingers immediately, and the sound stopped, just like before. But this time, I kept my hand pressed against the brass surface and waited. After 30 seconds, I felt it, a vibration, subtle but distinct, like a heartbeat, a pulse, regular and rhythmic, resonating through the metal. I pulled my hand away. The humming returned, that sustained tone, unchanging. I sealed Unit 9 quickly, applied fresh sealant around the frame, made sure everything was airtight and weather resistant. Professional work, clean and thorough, but I check on it now, every week, without fail. I remove the plaque and take the urn's temperature. It's always the same, always between 98 and 99 degrees, always humming that low, impossible note. Bill and I are the only ones who know. We've documented everything, but we haven't reported it to anyone else. What would we say? How would we explain it? Patricia Morrison's family visits occasionally. They place flowers at her niche, stand quietly for a few minutes, then leave. They never mention hearing anything unusual, never ask about the temperature. The plaque looks exactly like all the others, but I know what's behind it. I know about the warmth, the hum, the pulse I felt that one morning when I held my hand against the brass for too long. 9 years in this work, and I thought I understood the boundaries between life and death. Thought I knew what was possible and what wasn't. Unit 9 taught me otherwise. Some sounds don't need a living source. Some warmth persists long after the fire has burned out. And some things, some presences, some essences, some part of what we were, refuse to go completely cold, even when reduced to ash and sealed away from the light. I still perform sealant maintenance on the columbarium walls, still inspect and repair and document, but I listen more carefully now, and I pay attention to temperature, and whenever I work near Section 3, Row 2, Unit 9, I feel the hum before I hear it, a vibration in my chest, a resonance in my bones, reminding me that what we contain in brass and marble isn't always as quiet or as cold as we assume. Patricia Morrison is still there, still warm, still humming her single, endless note. And I've learned to work around her without asking why. Some questions don't have answers that would make sense. Some mysteries are meant to persist, sealed behind bronze and witnessed only by those who know where to listen. Some doors were never meant to be opened from the inside. My name is Chen Zhao, and I have worked as a wall repair lead at Oak Ridge Memorial Cemetery in Portland, Oregon for 17 years. I specialize in structural restoration of older columbarium sections, fixing cracks, replacing damaged stone, ensuring the integrity of niches that have held cremated remains for decades. The work requires patience and attention to detail. You're not just repairing walls, you're maintaining the final resting places of thousands of people. That responsibility weighs on you, keeps you careful and respectful. Until I opened Unit 7 in Section D, I'd never questioned what might happen inside a sealed compartment. The job was straightforward. A 1963 installation showing significant marble deterioration. The family had reported visible cracks in the facing, and our inspection confirmed the damage extended deep enough to compromise the seal. Standard repair work: remove the deteriorated marble, inspect the compartment, install new facing, reseal everything properly. The plaque read, Thomas Edward Walsh, January 9th, 1912 to August 27th, 1912, 1963. The bronze was in decent condition, minimal oxidation. I removed it carefully and set it aside, then began the delicate process of extracting the cracked marble facing. The damage was worse than I'd anticipated. The marble had fractured in multiple places, and removing it required careful prying to avoid further breakage. When the facing finally came free, I saw the scratches immediately. Deep, jagged marks scored into the interior surface of the marble door. Parallel lines, repetitive patterns. The kind of marks that could only be made by something scraping against the stone with significant force. From inside the sealed compartment, I set the broken marble pieces down carefully and pulled out my flashlight. The scratches were unmistakable, dozens of them, concentrated near what would have been the center of the door when it was sealed. Some were shallow, others cut deep enough to leave visible grooves. All of them oriented the same way, as if something had been dragging across the surface repeatedly in the same motion. I directed my light into the niche itself. The urn sat undisturbed on its marble shelf, a simple Bremse vessel, properly sealed. But the urn's lid showed hairline cracks radiating outward from the center in a starburst pattern. The cracks were fine, barely visible, but they covered the entire upper surface of the lid. I took photographs, documented everything. Then I called my supervisor. I need you to look at something in Section D, Unit 7. There's damage I can't explain. He arrived within 15 minutes. Martin Reed, 28 years in cemetery management. I showed him the scratches on the marble facing, then the cracks in the urn lid. He examined both in silence, his expression growing more troubled with each passing moment. These marks were made from inside, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I know, but that's not possible. The compartment was sealed in 1963. Nothing could have... He stopped, looked at the urn again. We need to open it. The family hasn't authorized. I'll take responsibility. We need to verify the contents. We documented everything first. Photographs from multiple angles, measurements of the scratch patterns, temperature readings. Then Martin carefully lifted the urn from its shelf and brought it into the light. The hairline cracks were even more visible in direct sunlight. They covered the entire lid like a spider web, all radiating from a central point. Martin tried to twist the lid. It resisted at first, the seal still partially intact despite the cracks. He applied more pressure. The lid turned with a grinding sound and came free. Inside the urn, ash, standard cremains, gray and fine, exactly as they should be. But the interior walls of the brass vessel showed marks, parallel scratches, similar to those on the marble door, shallower, less distinct, but unmistakably there. Something had been moving inside the sealed urn, scraping against the metal, and the force had been strong enough to crack the lid from within. Martin set the urn down on my work tarp. We stared at it without speaking. The morning had turned warm, but I felt cold standing there in the sunlight, looking at evidence of something that shouldn't be possible. Check the records, Martin said quietly. Find out everything you can about Thomas Walsh, cause of death, cremation details, family circumstances, anything unusual. I went to the office and pulled the file. Thomas Walsh had died at age 51. Cause of death, acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. The cremation had been performed at Riverside Crematory, now closed, no unusual notations, no complications reported, standard cremation, standard interment. But tucked into the back of the file was a single page I'd almost missed, a note from the funeral director who'd handled the arrangements. Handwritten, dated August 30th, 1963. Family requested expedited cremation. Mrs. Walsh insistent on immediate processing despite unclear timeline of death. Proceeded per signed authorization. Minor concerns about rigor presentation, but physician certification was valid. Minor concerns about rigor presentation. The note was vague, probably deliberately so, but it suggested something had been unusual about the body's condition, something the funeral director had noticed but hadn't documented officially. I showed Martin the note. He read it twice. Rigor mortis, he said. The body's muscle stiffness after death. It follows a predictable timeline. Begins 2 to 6 hours after death, peaks around 12 hours, then gradually fades over the next day or two. If the rigor presentation was unusual, he might not have been dead long enough, I finished. The words hung between us. Unspoken implications. A man pronounced dead, cremated quickly, sealed in a niche, and then, what? Consciousness returning, awareness trapped in an urn, the mind recoiling against impossible confinement. We can't know that, Martin said firmly. The physician certified the death. Everything was legal and proper. Whatever happened, it's over now. But we both looked back at Section D at Unit 7 with its open compartment and scratched marble, at the urn with its cracked lid and scored interior walls. Martin resealed the urn carefully. We placed it back on its shelf. I installed new marble facing, clean stone with no marks, no history. We mounted the bronze plaque and sealed everything properly. Professional work, no evidence of what we'd found. But I documented everything in my personal files. Photographs of the scratches, copies of the funeral director's note, measurements of the damage patterns. I keep them in a locked drawer in my workshop. The repair was completed within a week. The Walsh family was satisfied with the restoration. They never asked about delays or complications. Never knew we'd opened the urn. Never saw the evidence of what had happened inside their father's sealed compartment over 60 years ago. I still work at Oak Ridge Memorial, still repair damaged niches and replace deteriorated stone, but I pay attention now to the condition of urns when I open compartments for maintenance. I look for cracks, for scratches, for any sign that something moved inside the sealed brass after the cremation was complete. I've found 3 more since Thomas Walsh. Different sections, different time periods, all showing similar patterns. Scratches on the interior surfaces, cracks radiating from the urn lids, all sealed decades ago and left undisturbed until routine maintenance revealed what had been hidden. I don't open those urns anymore. I document the exterior damage, replace the facing, reseal the compartments, and move on. What's inside can stay inside. Some questions don't need answers, but late at night, when I'm alone in my workshop, I think about those scratch marks. I think about the force required to score marble from the inside of a sealed niche. I think about Thomas Walsh and the minor concerns about his rigor presentation. And I think about the 3 minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10, between when a heart stops beating and when consciousness as finally fades. That brief window when the mind might still be aware, still fighting, still trying to signal that something terrible has gone wrong. The plaque is sealed now. Section D, Unit 7, clean marble facing, polished bronze, everything exactly as it should be. The Walsh family visits occasionally. They never mention hearing anything unusual, but I wonder sometimes if Thomas Walsh is finally quiet, or if he's still in there, still scraping against the brass and patterns we'll never see, still trying to tell someone that he wasn't ready, that it happened too fast, that he asked for more time, but nobody heard him in those final moments before the fire began. Some doors close and never open again. Some seals were meant to be permanent, and some scratches in the dark are evidence of struggles that ended long before anyone thought to look. Some people end up in places they were never supposed to be. My name is Carter Delaney, and I have worked as a niche installation specialist at Willowbrook Cemetery in Des Moines, Iowa for 12 years. My primary responsibility involves plaque maintenance, cleaning oxidized bronze, re-engraving faded text, ensuring the inscriptions remain legible for families who visit their loved ones. The work is detail-oriented and precise. You're preserving names, dates, and memories that matter deeply to people. One mistake, one misread letter, and you've damaged something irreplaceable. I thought I understood the importance of accuracy until I discovered someone was in the wrong place entirely. The job came in on a Wednesday. Section B, Row 9, Unit 14. The family had requested re-engraving work on a 1994 installation. The original text had faded significantly, common with certain bronze alloys exposed to our humid climate. I'd performed similar restorations dozens of times. The plaque read, Catherine Rose Bennett, devoted teacher, May 5th, 1937 to March 12th, 1994. The engraving was barely visible in places. I removed the plaque carefully and transported it to my workshop for cleaning and re-engraving. Standard procedure requires opening the niche to verify the urn's nameplate matches the plaque information before proceeding with restoration work. Simple quality control prevents mix-ups and confirms we're working on the correct memorial. I opened the compartment and directed my flashlight at the urn. Standard brass vessel, properly sealed. I leaned in to read the nameplate affixed to the front. The name didn't match. The urn read, Robert James Mitchell, January 9th, 1942 to November 7th, 1942, 1993. I blinked, read it again. Still Robert Mitchell, not Catherine Bennett. Wrong name, wrong dates, wrong person entirely. I checked the plaque again. Definitely Catherine Rose Bennett. I checked the niche number. Section B, row 9, unit 14. Exactly where the work order specified. Everything was correct except the urn inside didn't belong to the person whose name was on the door. I photographed everything and called my supervisor immediately. We have a problem. The urn doesn't match the plaque. Different name entirely. Are you certain you're looking at the right niche? Positive. I've triple checked Catherine Bennett's plaque, Robert Mitchell's urn. They don't match. There was a long pause. Don't touch anything else. I'm coming down. Director Patterson arrived within 20 minutes. I showed her the plaque, then the urn nameplate. She verified the niche number herself. Then she pulled out her tablet and accessed our digital records. Catherine Rose Bennett, she read aloud. Cremated at Westside Crematory, March 15th, 1994. Interred here on March 18th, 1994. Single occupant niche. No subsequent changes or transfers. And Robert Mitchell? She searched the database. Her expression changed. Robert James Mitchell, buried, not cremated, buried, at Elmwood Gardens Cemetery on the east side. November 10th, 1993, Plot 73, Section F, full casket burial. We stared at each other. Robert Mitchell was supposed to be in a casket across town, but his urn was here in Catherine Bennett's niche, which meant Catherine Bennett's ashes were where? Patterson made several phone calls. First to our records department, requesting the original interment paperwork for the Bennett niche. Then to Elmwood Gardens, asking them to verify the Mitchell burial. We waited in tense silence while the documentation was pulled. The records arrived via email. I watched Patterson's face as she read through them. She went pale. What is it? I asked. The Catherine Bennett interment paperwork is standard, signed by her daughter, Rebecca Bennett Hayes. Urn delivered by Westside Crematory on March 18th. Witnessed installation, everything documented properly. She scrolled down. But look at the crematory delivery log. She turned the tablet toward me. The delivery notation read, urn delivered, brass vessel, standard seal, nameplate, Robert James Mitchell. The crematory had delivered the wrong urn, and nobody had noticed. For 29 years, Robert Mitchell's ashes had been sealed in Catherine Bennett's niche, while Catherine's remains were somewhere else. Call Elmwood Gardens back, I said. Ask them to open Mitchell's grave. Patterson looked at me. That requires family authorization, court orders. We can't just... We need to know if Catherine is there. If the mix-up was reciprocal, she made the call, explained the situation to Elmwood's director. The conversation was long and increasingly agitated. Finally, she hung up. They're sending someone to do a preliminary inspection of the Mitchell grave. Non invasive, just checking surface conditions and records. If they find evidence of irregularities, they'll contact Mitchell's family for authorization to investigate further. We sealed the Bennett niche temporarily and waited. 2 hours later, Patterson's phone rang. She listened for several minutes, her expression growing more troubled. When she ended the call, she sat down heavily on the nearby bench. Elmwood found inconsistencies, she said quietly. The Mitchell grave shows signs of being opened and resealed sometime after the original burial in 1993. The grass growth patterns are wrong. The soil settlement doesn't match a 1993 burial. Their groundskeeper remembers complaints from the family about the grave sinking irregularly. So someone opened it and placed something inside. Probably an urn, probably Catherine Bennett's urn. The implications settled over us like cold fog. Someone, a crematory worker, a cemetery employee, someone had made a catastrophic error, delivered the wrong urn to the wrong cemetery, then, realizing the mistake, had attempted to correct it by secretly placing Catherine's urn in Robert's grave. No documentation, no family notification, just a quiet burial of an urn in a casket plot, hoping nobody would ever notice. We need to contact both families, Patterson said. I don't even know what this is. A violation of everything we're supposed to protect. The notifications were made that afternoon. Rebecca Bennett Hayes received the news that her mother's ashes were likely buried in a stranger's grave. The Mitchell family learned that Robert's cremated remains that shouldn't exist because he'd been buried intact, were in someone else's niche. The confusion on both sides was immediate and profound. Robert Mitchell's family insisted he'd been buried in a casket. They had documentation, funeral records, cemetery receipts, a grave they'd visited for 29 years. Rebecca Bennett Hayes confirmed her mother had been cremated. She'd authorized it, attended the cremation, received confirmation from Westside Crematory. The investigation took 3 weeks. The findings were devastating. Westside Crematory had processed both deaths within days of each other in March 1994. Catherine Bennett, cremation. Robert Mitchell, supposed to be a direct burial, no cremation. But a new employee had misread the processing orders. Robert Mitchell had been cremated by mistake. Catherine Bennett's body had been prepared for burial. When the error was discovered, probably within hours, someone at the crematory had panicked. Instead of reporting the mistake, they'd attempted to cover it. Delivered Robert's ashes to Catherine's family. Delivered Catherine's body to Robert's family for casket burial. 2 families, 2 funerals, neither knowing they'd received the wrong person. The crematory had closed in 1998. The employee responsible was long gone, possibly deceased. No one to hold accountable, no way to undo 29 years of deception. Both families were given the option to correct the situation. The Mitchells could exhume the casket, retrieve Catherine's urn, and have Robert's ashes transferred to his grave. The Bennetts could have their mother's remains moved from the Mitchell plot to her proper niche. Both families declined. Too much time had passed. Too much grief had already been processed. They'd been visiting the wrong remains for nearly 3 decades, But the visits had been real. The mourning had been real. Moving everything now felt like disturbing peace that had finally settled. Rebecca Bennett Hayes made one request. She wanted to visit Robert Mitchell's urn before it was transferred back to his family. I arranged it quietly. She stood in front of Unit 14 for 20 minutes, just looking at her mother's plaque. Then she placed her hand on the bronze and whispered something I couldn't hear. When she left, her eyes were dry. I said goodbye to my mother 29 years ago, she told me. I said it to the wrong ashes, but it still counted. Let Robert's family have him back. Let them do what they need to do. The transfer was completed the following week. Robert Mitchell's ashes were moved to Elmwood Gardens and properly interred in his grave alongside Catherine Bennett's urn. Catherine's niche here at Willowbrook was left empty. Rebecca chose not to fill it with another memorial. I re-engraved the Catherine Bennett plaque as requested. The bronze gleams now, the text sharp and clear, but the niche behind it is empty. A memorial to someone who was never there, maintained by a daughter who understands that sometimes the truth matters less than the love we carry for the people we've lost. I still do re-engraving work, still verify urn nameplates against plaque information, but I check more carefully now. I look for discrepancies. I question inconsistencies. Because I've learned that mistakes happen, that cover-ups exist, and that sometimes people spend decades mourning the wrong ashes without ever knowing the truth. Unit 14 stands empty. The plaque is beautiful, and every time I walk past it, I think about Catherine Bennett, buried in someone else's grave, and Robert Mitchell deceased in someone else's niche, and the families who loved them both without ever knowing they'd been lied to from the very beginning. Some errors are too big to fix. Some truths arrive too late to matter, and some memorials, even empty ones, still serve their purpose as long as someone remembers to say the names carved into bronze and mean them when they do. Some temperatures don't follow the laws of physics. My name is Lena Ortega, and I have worked as a restoration technician at Heritage Memorial Gardens in Tucson, Arizona for 13 years. The climate here is brutal on columbarium structures: extreme heat, minimal rainfall, intense UV exposure. My job involves monitoring environmental conditions, maintaining structural integrity, and ensuring the bronze and marble can withstand temperatures that regularly exceed 100 degrees in summer months. I've learned to work in the heat, to recognize the signs of thermal stress in materials, to predict when expansion and contraction will cause problems. Until I encountered niche 22B, I thought I understood temperature. The anomaly was first reported by a visiting family member. He'd placed his hand on the plaque while saying a prayer and immediately pulled away, complaining about the cold. Our staff dismissed it. Grief does strange things to perception. The afternoon temperature was 94 degrees. Nothing in the columbarium could be cold, but the complaints continued. Multiple visitors, different times of day, all reporting the same thing. Unit 22B was ice cold to the touch, while every surrounding plaque radiated the desert heat we expected. I was assigned to investigate. I arrived at the columbarium at 10 in the morning with my standard diagnostic equipment: infrared thermometer, thermal imaging camera, moisture detector. The ambient temperature read an 87 degrees, typical for late May in Tucson. I approached Unit 22B and held out my hand toward the bronze plaque. Before I even made contact, I felt it. A pocket of cold air emanating from the niche, distinct, unmistakable. I touched the plaque. The bronze was freezing. I pulled out my infrared thermometer and aimed it at the surface. The display showed 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I checked it again, thinking I'd misread. Still 41 degrees. The plaque beside it read 93 degrees. The marble wall surrounding Unit 22B read 89 degrees. But the bronze door to that specific niche was 46 degrees below ambient temperature. I pulled out my thermal imaging camera and scanned the entire section. On the screen, the columbarium wall appeared in yellows and oranges, heat signatures matching the morning sun, except for one rectangular patch of deep blue. Unit 22B. A cold spot so pronounced it looked like someone had installed a refrigeration unit behind the bronze. I took photographs, documented everything. Then I checked our maintenance records for that niche. The plaque read, Eleanor Grace Morrison, beloved mother, September 4th, 1941 to February 9th, 1941, 2018. A relatively recent interment, only 7 years old. Nothing in the file indicated problems. Standard cremation, standard installation, no complications reported. I needed to open it. I removed the bronze plaque carefully and immediately felt the temperature drop intensify. Cold air poured out of the open compartment like opening a freezer. My breath misted in the Arizona heat. I directed my flashlight inside. The urn sat on its marble shelf, covered in a thin layer of frost. Actual frost. Crystalline ice formation coating the brass vessel in the middle of a desert morning that was approaching 90 degrees. I aimed my infrared thermometer at the urn. 36 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. I checked the marble shelf. 38 degrees. The back wall of the compartment, 34 degrees. The entire niche interior existed in a microclimate at least 50 degrees colder than the surrounding environment. I backed away from the open compartment and called my supervisor. I need someone from facilities to check Unit 22B. We have an extreme temperature anomaly. I don't know if it's a refrigerant leak or we don't have refrigeration systems in the columbarium. I know, but this niche is 36 degrees. There's frost on the urn. Silence. Then, I'm sending someone. Don't touch anything else. The facilities manager arrived with 2 technicians. They brought additional diagnostic equipment, gas detectors, structurals imaging, electrical testing tools. We spent 2 hours examining Unit 22B from every angle. No refrigerant leaks, no hidden cooling systems, no electrical anomalies, no underground water sources, no ventilation issues, no structural defects that would allow cold air intrusion. The niche was simply impossibly cold. One technician suggested ground temperature variation. Maybe there's a thermal sink beneath this section. Cold earth, different mineral composition. We checked. The wall's foundation showed uniform temperature. The niches above and below 22B were normal, left and right, normal. Only this single compartment defied every environmental measurement. What was Morrison's cause of death? The facilities manager asked. I checked the file on my tablet. Hypothermia. She wandered away from her care facility during a cold snap in February, found deceased the next morning. Exposure to low temperatures. Everyone stopped talking. We all looked back at Unit 22B with its frosted urn and impossible cold. That's a coincidence, the facilities manager said, but his voice lacked conviction. We monitored the temperature hourly for the rest of the day. By noon, when the ambient air temperature reached 103 degrees, Unit 22B measured 34 degrees. By 3 in the afternoon, with the columbarium wall baking in direct sunlight at 108 degrees, the niche held steady at 33 degrees. The frost on the urn never melted. I contacted Eleanor Morrison's daughter, explaining we'd discovered a temperature regulation issue with her mother's niche and asking permission to temporarily relocate the urn while we investigated the structural cause. She agreed immediately, grateful we were being proactive about preservation. 2 days later, we carefully removed Eleanor's urn from Unit 22B. The brass was so cold it burned my hands through work gloves. We placed it in a climate-controlled storage room while facilities continued their investigation. Within 6 hours of removing the urn, Unit 22B returned to normal temperature. The frost melted. The compartment warmed to match the surrounding marble. By evening, it read 91 degrees, exactly what we'd expect. We ran tests for another week. The niche remained normal, no cold spots, no temperature anomalies. Facilities declared it safe for reinstallation. But when we placed Eleanor Morrison's urn back in Unit 22B, the temperature dropped within minutes. Within an hour, frost had reformed on the brass surface. Within 3 hours, the niche had returned to 36 degrees despite the 100-degree heat outside. Morrison's daughter was notified. We explained the situation as gently as possible. Her mother's niche exhibited unexplained temperature regulation issues. We could offer her a different location at no charge, a transfer to a climate-stable section. She visited the columbarium to see for herself. I watched her approach Unit 22B slowly, hesitantly. She placed her hand on the cold bronze plaque and left it there for a long moment. When she pulled away, there were tears on her face. My mother died alone in the cold, she said quietly. She was always terrified of freezing, had nightmares about it her entire life, and then that's exactly how she died. Cold, alone, frightened. She looked at me. Can we leave her here? I know it's strange. I know it doesn't make sense, but maybe she's trying to tell us something. Maybe she's still cold. Maybe she needs to be somewhere cold now, because that's what she knows. I didn't know how to respond. Protocol said we should relocate urns with environmental issues, but protocol didn't account for niches that defied thermodynamics. Protocol didn't account for frost in the desert or daughters who wanted to honor their mother's death by preserving the impossible cold that took her. We can leave her here, I said. We'll monitor it regularly. Make sure the cold doesn't cause structural damage. But if that's what you want, we'll accommodate it. She nodded. Thank you. I think I think she's where she needs to be. That was 6 years ago. Eleanor Morrison's urn still rests in Unit 22B. The niche maintains its steady 33 to 36 degree temperature regardless of external conditions. In winter, when Tucson cools down, the niche stays the same. In summer, when the columbarium wall reaches 115 degrees, Unit 22B remains frozen. I check on it monthly, verify the frost patterns, measure the temperature, document everything in my maintenance logs. The records show an impossible consistency. This single compartment exists in perpetual winter while surrounded by desert heat. Families visiting nearby niches sometimes comment on the cold. They'll place a hand on Morrison's plaque by accident and pull away quickly, startled by the temperature. I always explain it's a unique environmental condition we're monitoring. Most people accept that. Some look at the frosted edges of the bronze and ask questions I can't answer. Morrison's daughter visits quarterly. She always brings flowers, cold weather varieties, winter blooms. She places them in the small vase mount beside the plaque and speaks quietly to her mother. The flowers last longer there than they should in our climate. The cold preserves them. I've worked in cemetery maintenance for 13 years. I understand thermal expansion and material science and the way desert heat affects stone and metal. I know what's possible and what isn't. Unit 22B shouldn't exist. The cold shouldn't persist. The frost shouldn't survive in 100-degree heat. But it does, every day, every hour. A pocket of February preserved in permanent summer, holding a woman who died alone in the cold and can't seem to let it go. Some temperatures carry meaning beyond degrees. Some cold runs deeper than physics can explain. And some people, even after cremation, even after years of rest, still hold on to the final sensation they felt when life ended, recreating it endlessly in the space where their ashes wait. Eleanor Morrison is still cold, still frosting, still existing in those final hours of hypothermia that took her life. And her daughter visits her there in that impossible winter and tells her she's not alone anymore. I keep monitoring, keep documenting, keep checking that niche every month to make sure the cold holds steady. Because some anomalies aren't problems to be fixed. Some temperatures are memories made physical, and some people need to be cold forever because warmth would mean forgetting how they died. Some things move when nobody's watching. My name is Mark Tillman, and I have worked as a wall installation specialist at Riverside Memorial Park in Sacramento, California for 19 years. My responsibilities include structural maintenance, plaque alignment, and ensuring the geometric precision of our columbarium sections. The work demands exactness. Every plaque must be level, every row must be straight, every installation must meet strict tolerances. Families notice when things are crooked. They notice when the symmetry is broken. Attention to detail isn't just professional pride, it's respect for the people whose names we're preserving. Until the night the plaques moved, I thought I understood what it meant for something to stay in place. The call came in on a Thursday morning. Security had noticed an anomaly during their overnight rounds. Section F, Row 8. Multiple plaques appeared to have shifted position. The overnight guard couldn't explain it. He'd walked past the wall at 11 at night during his first rotation, and everything looked normal. When he passed again at 3 in the morning, 5 plaques in a horizontal row were visibly crooked. I arrived at 6:30 and immediately saw the problem. Units 12 through 16 on row 8, all 5 bronze plaques tilted at slight angles, not uniform, each one canted differently, as if someone had loosened the mounting screws and pushed them askew. The misalignment was subtle but unmistakable. These walls were installed with laser precision. Nothing should shift on its own. I checked the mounting hardware, all screws tight, no evidence of tampering or loosening. I used a level to measure each plaque's deviation. Unit 12, 2 degrees off vertical. Unit 13, 3 degrees. Unit 14, 4 degrees. 15 and 16 showed similar tilts, all in different directions. Security provided footage from the overnight cameras. I watched the timestamp closely. At 11:04 at night, row 8 appeared perfectly aligned. At 2:58 in the morning, all 5 plaques were crooked, and the camera showed nothing. No people, no animals, no seismic activity, just a static view of the columbarium wall for 3 hours and 54 minutes. Then, between one frame and the next, a jump cut of less than 1 second, the plaques shifted, all 5, simultaneously, in complete silence. I watched the footage 6 times. The movement happened in a single frame. One moment, aligned, next moment, crooked, no transition, no gradual shift, just instant displacement. I reported to my supervisor, "We have a structural problem, or someone's accessing the wall after hours. The plaques moved, but there's no evidence of how." Earthquake? Nothing registered on seismic monitors, and an earthquake wouldn't affect just 5 plaques in one row. Thermal expansion? Not overnight. Temperatures were stable, and expansion doesn't explain why they're tilted in different directions. He watched the security footage himself. I saw his expression change as he observed the impossible frame transition. "Re-level them," he said finally. "Document everything, and we'll increase overnight security monitoring on that section." I spent the morning carefully adjusting each plaque back to perfect vertical alignment. Used precision instruments to ensure every angle matched specifications. Tightened every screw, verified every mount. When I finished, row 8 was geometrically perfect. Security installed an additional camera with a tighter focus on that specific row. High resolution, motion activated alerts. If anything moved, we'd capture it. The next morning, I received an alert at 4:17 in the morning. Camera had detected movement in section F. I pulled up the footage on my phone. The plaques had shifted again. Same 5 units, different angles this time, and the camera captured the moment it happened, between one frame and the next, instantaneous displacement. No hands, no tools, no visible force, just bronze plaques moving from aligned to crooked in less than 1/60th of a second. I was at the columbarium by 6 in the morning. This time, I didn't just re-level the plaques. I removed them entirely. One by one, I unmounted each bronze door and examined the niche compartments behind them. Unit 12, normal. Urn properly seated. No visible issues. Unit 13, normal. Unit 14, normal. Unit 15, normal. Unit 16. I stopped. When I shined my flashlight into the compartment, I saw fingerprints on the back wall. Fresh fingerprints, small, child-sized, pressed into the marble as if someone had been pushing against the stone from inside the sealed space. I photographed them immediately, then checked the other niches again, looking more carefully. Units 12 through 15 all showed the same marks, small handprints on the interior back walls. Impossibly placed. The compartments had been sealed for years. No one could have accessed them from inside, but someone, something, had been pressing against the marble, and the force had been strong enough to shift the plaques on the exterior. I called my supervisor, showed him the photographs, watched him study the fingerprints with growing discomfort. Check the interment records, he said quietly. Find out who's in those 5 niches. I pulled the files, read through them systematically. Unit 12, Michael Patterson, aged 7, died 2014. Unit 13, Sarah Chen, aged 5, died 2015. Unit 14, Marcus Webb, aged 9, died 2016. Unit 15, Emma Rodriguez, aged 6, died 2017. Unit 16, David Kim, aged 8, died 2018. 5 children, all under age 10, all cremated, all interred in consecutive niches on row 8. Why are they grouped together? I asked. My supervisor checked the cemetery's organizational records. Family request pattern. When we have multiple child interments in a short time period, some families request placement near other children. They don't want their child to be alone. We accommodate when possible. 5 children, placed together, their ashes sealed in consecutive compartments. And somehow they were moving, pushing against the marble, shifting their own plaques from the inside. What do we do? I asked. We re-level the plaques, we monitor, and we don't tell the families that their children might be. He stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. I spent the afternoon carefully remounting each plaque. Before sealing them, I looked at those small handprints one more time, pressed into the marble, reaching outward, trying to push through. I sealed the plaques with industrial adhesive, extra strength, made them as secure as physically possible. Then I stepped back and hoped that would be enough. It wasn't. The movement continued. Every few nights, always between 2 and 4 in the morning, always the same 5 plaques. We installed additional cameras, increased monitoring, documented every shift, but we couldn't stop it. The pattern became predictable. The plaques would shift. We'd re-level them. They'd shift again within 48 hours. An endless cycle of displacement and correction. After 3 weeks, I tried something different. Instead of forcing the plaques back to perfect alignment, I left them slightly tilted. Small deviations, barely noticeable to casual observers, but deliberate on my part. I wanted to see if the movement would stop if I didn't resist it. That night, the plaques shifted again, but this time they moved back toward alignment. Not perfectly level, but closer than they'd been. as if whoever was pushing from inside was trying to straighten them, trying to correct the angles. I adjusted them again the next day, brought them closer to perfect vertical, but still left tiny deviations. That night, they shifted again, closer still. Over the course of 2 weeks, through this gradual process of adjustment and response, the plaques settled into perfect alignment, and they stayed there. The movement stopped. The fingerprints faded from the interior marble. I checked during routine maintenance months later, and the marks were gone. The 5 niches became quiet, but I understood something I'd never wanted to know. Those children, Michael, Sarah, Marcus, Emma, David, they weren't trying to escape. They weren't fighting against their confinement. They were trying to fix something, trying to straighten their crooked plaques, trying to make their row perfect and aligned like everything else in the columbarium. They were trying to fit in, to belong, to look like they were supposed to look, because even in death, even reduced to ash and sealed behind bronze, they were still children who wanted things to be right, who noticed when they were crooked, who pushed and worked and moved their own memorials until everything was straight. I still maintain Section F, still check Row 8 regularly. The plaques remain perfectly level now. The children's urns rest undisturbed behind their aligned bronze doors. Everything looks exactly as it should. But late at night, when I'm alone in my workshop reviewing security footage, I sometimes watch that frame-by-frame transition. The moment when 5 bronze plaques shift position in less than 1/60th of a second. The impossible movement that shouldn't exist but does. And I think about small hands pressing against marble, about children working together in the dark to straighten their crooked doors, about the care they took to make everything perfect, even when no one was watching except cameras that couldn't explain what they recorded. The families visit regularly. They place flowers. They touch the bronze plaques and speak quiet words to their lost children. They never mention anything unusual, never notice the history of displacement and correction that brought Row 8 to its current perfect alignment. But I know I documented everything. I have the photographs of those small fingerprints. I have the footage of plaques moving on their own. I have the records showing that 5 children, placed together so they wouldn't be alone, worked together to fix something that bothered them. Some things stay in place because we anchor them there. Some things move because they need to. And some children, even after death, even after cremation, still care about getting things right and will work through the night to make sure their row looks perfect come morning. Row 8 is straight now, perfectly aligned, and every time I walk past it, I silently thank Michael, Sarah, Marcus, Emma, and David for their patience, for working with me instead of against me, for teaching me that sometimes the answer isn't to force things into position, but to let them show you where they need to be. Some prayers are meant to be heard. My name is Sonia Blackwell, and I have worked as a lead installation technician at Pinewood Memorial Gardens in Eugene, Oregon for 23 years. My primary responsibility involves new niche installations, receiving cremated remains from families, sealing urns in their designated compartments, mounting plaques, and ensuring everything meets our quality standards. The work is sacred in its way. You're completing someone's final journey. You're giving families the certainty that their loved one is properly cared for and permanently at rest. That responsibility has always mattered to me. Until I sealed Unit 47 in Section C, I'd never questioned whether the dead could still speak. The installation was routine. Mrs. Patricia Vance, aged 83, cremated after a long illness. Her daughter had selected a quiet corner location, one of the smaller niches in our oldest columbarium section. The family attended the brief interment ceremony, just the daughter and two grandchildren. They stayed for 10 minutes, said their goodbyes, and left me to complete the technical work of sealing and mounting the plaque. I carried Patricia's urn to Unit 47 and placed it carefully on the marble shelf inside the compartment. Standard brass vessel, properly sealed. I positioned it exactly center, verified it was stable, then prepared to install the bronze plaque that would seal the niche. That's when I heard the whispering, faint, rhythmic, coming from inside the compartment. I stopped moving, listened carefully. The sound continued, soft, persistent, like someone speaking just below the threshold of clear comprehension. I couldn't make out words, only the cadence of speech, the pattern of vocalization. I leaned closer to the open niche. The whispering grew slightly louder, though still indistinct, definitely coming from inside the compartment, from the direction of the urn. I told myself it was wind through the columbarium's ventilation system, air moving through gaps in the old stonework. Perfectly natural, nothing to be concerned about. But we don't have active ventilation in the columbariums. And there was no wind that day. The morning was still and quiet. I reached into the compartment and touched the urn, checking its position. The whispering stopped immediately. Complete silence. I withdrew my hand. After 10 seconds, the sound resumed. Same rhythm, same faint vocalization. I should have called my supervisor, should have documented the anomaly, and requested assistance, but 23 years in this work had taught me that strange sounds often have simple explanations. Maybe the urn wasn't properly sealed. Maybe air was escaping through a gap in the lid, creating sounds as pressure equalized. I grasped the urn firmly and attempted to twist the lid, checking the seal. The lid was tight, properly secured, no gaps, no air leakage. But while I held the urn, I felt something, a vibration, subtle but distinct, pulsing through the brass in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like breath. I set the urn back on the shelf quickly and stepped away from the niche. My hands were shaking. The whispering continued, unchanged. That same soft, persistent sound that shouldn't exist. I needed to complete the installation. I had other work scheduled that afternoon. 3 more interments waiting. I couldn't spend the day investigating unexplained sounds. I positioned the bronze plaque over the compartment opening. The whispering grew more urgent, still indistinct but faster now, more insistent. I aligned the mounting holes and prepared to drive the first screw. The whispering became clearly audible words. Please, don't. I dropped the drill. The voice was female, quiet but unmistakable, coming from inside the urn, from Patricia Vance's sealed brass vessel containing her cremated remains. Please, Listen. I backed away from the wall. My breath came short and fast. The logical part of my mind insisted this was impossible. The urn was sealed. The cremation had been completed days ago. Dead people don't speak. Ashes don't form words. But the voice continued. Please, I need to tell someone. I should have run, should have left the columbarium and called for help. But something in that voice, the quiet desperation, the need, kept me there. Against every instinct, I stepped closer to the open niche. What do you need to tell someone? I heard myself ask. The whispering summoned for a long moment. Then, the fire. I was awake. Ice flooded my veins. What do you mean, awake? During the cremation, I felt it. I was still there, still aware. The heat, the burning. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, but I felt everything. And I'm still here, still feeling it, still burning. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and pulled up Patricia Vance's file. Cause of death, terminal cancer, heavy sedation in final days. Pronounced dead at the hospice facility. Standard death certification, cremation authorization, signed by her daughter. You were pronounced dead, I said, my voice barely steady. The doctor certified it. You weren't alive during the cremation. I know what they said. I know what they believed. But I was there. I was conscious. And the fire, it never stops. I'm still burning every moment, every second. Make it stop. Please make it stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. If what she was saying was true, if some part of consciousness persisted through cremation, if awareness survived the fire, it meant every urn I'd installed, every set of ashes I'd sealed, might contain someone who was still experiencing their own cremation, still feeling the flames. I don't know how to help you, I whispered. Tell my daughter. Tell her what happened. Tell her I'm sorry I chose cremation. Tell her I didn't know I'd still be here. I can't tell her that. She'd think I'm... Then don't seal me. Don't close the plaque. Leave me open. Let me hear voices. Let me know I'm not alone in the fire. Please, don't leave me in darkness with only the burning. My hand moved toward the plaque almost involuntarily. I could install it, complete the job, seal Patricia Vance behind bronze and marble, and walk away, pretend I'd never heard anything, go back to my normal work, and never think about this again. But I'd heard her, and I'd felt that vibration in the brass, and I couldn't unknow what she'd told me. I'm going to seal the plaque, I said quietly, but I'm going to document what you told me. I'm going to write it down and keep it in your file so someone will know, so you won't be completely unheard. No, please don't seal me. Don't leave me alone with... I installed the plaque quickly, drove the screws tight, sealed the compartment completely. The whispering became muffled, then inaudible. Within 30 seconds, the niche was silent. I stood there for 5 minutes, staring at Patricia Vance's bronze memorial. Pristine, perfect, exactly like every other niche in the columbarium. No sign of what I'd heard, no evidence of the impossible conversation that had just occurred. I completed my remaining installations that afternoon in silence. Didn't speak to the urns, didn't listen for whispers, just worked mechanically. Place, seal, mount, move to the next one. But that night, I wrote down everything Patricia Vance had said. Every word I could remember. I placed the document in a sealed envelope and filed it with my personal records, not in the cemetery's official files. I didn't need people questioning my mental stability. But I kept it, documented it, because she'd asked to be heard, and I denied her that final request by sealing her away. I returned to work the next day, back to normal installations. But I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The way some urns felt heavier than others, even when their weight was identical. The way certain niches seemed to radiate something, not heat, not cold, but a presence, an awareness, and the whispers. Once you've heard them, you can't unhear them. They're always there, at the edge of perception, faint vocalizations from sealed compartments, prayers that continue long after death, voices that persist in the ashes, speaking to anyone who'll stop long enough to listen. I've never worked Section C, Row 8 again. I refuse assignments to that wall. When asked why, I say I have too many other projects. Nobody questions it. After 23 years, I've earned the right to selective assignments. But Unit 47 is still there. Patricia Vance's urn still rests on its marble shelf, sealed behind the bronze plaque I installed, despite her pleading. Her daughter visits monthly, places flowers, speaks quiet words through the metal door. I wonder if Patricia can hear her, if those brief visits provide relief from the eternal burning she described, or if every moment behind that sealed plaque is still fire and awareness and the terrible knowledge that she chose this herself by authorizing a cremation she didn't understand would leave her conscious. I don't know. I can't know. And I've learned not to ask. Because the worst part isn't wondering if Patricia Vance is still burning. The worst part is knowing that if she is, then hundreds of others in this columbarium might be experiencing the same thing. Sealed, aware, burning, whispering prayers into the darkness that nobody except me has ever stopped to hear. I still install urns, still seal niches, still mount plaques. It's my job, my responsibility, but I do it faster now. I don't linger. I don't listen, because if I stop to hear what might be there, if I acknowledge the whispers I can now detect in almost every compartment I work on, I'll never be able to seal another niche again. Some prayers are meant to be heard, but some of us learn to stop listening because the alternative is understanding that we've been sealing conscious suffering behind bronze and marble for our entire careers, one prayer at a time, with no way to stop and no way to help except to work quickly and never, ever lean too close to the open compartments where the voices wait to be heard. Unit 47 whispers still, I'm certain. Patricia Vance speaks her pain into the darkness, hoping someone will unseal her plaque and give her the light and voices she begged for. But I sealed her tight. Professional work, clean installation, and I walk past that wall every day without looking at it directly, carrying the weight of her last request that I denied because sealing her was my job, and some jobs require you to ignore the voices that ask you not to complete them. Some things break from the inside out. My name is Tobias Grant, and I have worked as a niche installer at Meadowview Cemetery in Lincoln, Nebraska for 18 years. My job involves maintaining the structural integrity of our columbarium walls, inspecting seals, monitoring for damage, ensuring each compartment remains secure and weatherproof. The work is methodical and precise. You learn to recognize deterioration before it becomes serious. Until I found Unit 31 in Section A, I thought all seal failures happened from the outside. A groundskeeper reported cement debris on the walkway beneath Section A during routine inspection. Just a small pile of gray powder and fragments, but enough to indicate something had broken. I arrived and immediately located the source. Unit 31, Row 5. The seal around the bronze plaque had failed catastrophically. Cement cracked and crumbled, leaving gaps around the plaque's edges. Not unusual. Cement degrades over time, especially in our freeze-thaw climate, except for the pattern of the damage. The cracks radiated outward from the plaque's center in a starburst pattern, the kind of pattern you see when something impacts from behind, when internal pressure exceeds the seal's capacity to contain it. I'd seen cement fail from weather exposure, improper mixing, age, but never breaking outward like this, like something had been pushing from inside the niche. I removed the loosened plaque carefully. It came away easily. I directed my flashlight into the compartment. The urn had tipped over, lying on its side on the marble shelf. The lid had come loose, and ashes had spilled across the shelf and compartment floor. Gray cremains forming a trail from the urn toward the front of the niche, toward where the seal had broken. I photographed everything before touching anything. The plaque inscription read, Gerald Arthur Morrison, at peace at last, December 7th, 1948 to June 3rd, 1978. 47 years since his interment. The phrase, at peace at last, struck me as I looked at the spilled ashes and broken seal. I lifted the brass vessel carefully. It was lighter than it should have been, significant ash loss from the open lid. The interior walls showed scratches, deep, repetitive marks. The same pattern I'd seen on the cement seal, radiating outward, like something scraping against metal from inside. The marble shelf showed no cracks, no instability, nothing that would cause an urn to tip on its own. But the ashes told a different story. The spill pattern wasn't random. The cremains had formed a deliberate trail from the urn toward the front of the compartment, not scattered by gravity, arranged, almost deliberately. I called my supervisor. I have a seal failure that doesn't make sense. The damage pattern suggests internal pressure. He arrived within the hour. I showed him everything, the broken seal, the tipped urn, the scratch marks, the trail of ashes. Rodent activity? He suggested. No entry points. The seal was intact until it broke from inside, and rodents don't create starburst crack patterns. He studied the ash trail carefully. This is directional, like something was moving the ashes toward the opening. We stood in silence, staring at evidence that defied logical explanation. Then my supervisor accessed the cemetery's historical records on his phone. He scrolled for several minutes, then stopped. Here, The original funeral director's notes from 1978. He read aloud. Family expressed concerns about deceased's final wishes. Mr. Morrison had made verbal statements against cremation prior to death. Family proceeded with cremation despite these preferences due to financial constraints. Significant family conflict during arrangements. Gerald Morrison didn't want to be cremated, he said, but he was, against his stated wishes, and they inscribed, "At peace at last," on his plaque. The irony was clear. A man who objected to cremation, reduced to ash anyway, sealed behind a plaque declaring his peace. 47 years later, his seal breaking outward, his urn tipped, his ashes scattered in a pattern suggesting movement toward escape. "What do we do?" I asked. My supervisor stared at the broken seal. "We clean up the ashes, reseal the urn, repair the cement, and reinstall the plaque. We document a standard seal failure due to age and environmental stress." That's not what happened here. That's what the official report will say, because the alternative is acknowledging that ashes somehow broke their own seal from inside. That consciousness or will persisted 47 years after cremation. I understood. Official reports required rational explanations. We'd report what people could accept and file away what we couldn't. We carefully gathered the spilled ashes and returned them to the urn. I sealed the lid with industrial adhesive, stronger than the original. We placed the urn back on the shelf, centered and stable. Then I mixed fresh cement and sealed the plaque back into position. As I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, "At peace at last." Someone had chosen those words, had them engraved in bronze, mounted them on Gerald Morrison's niche, despite knowing he'd objected to his own cremation. A permanent declaration of peace for a man who might not have wanted what was done to him. The seal held overnight, the next day, the next week. I checked it regularly. The cement cured properly. No cracks, no outward pressure. Whatever had broken through before seemed to have stopped, but I think about it constantly, about what it takes to break a cement seal from inside a closed compartment, about the force required to tip a brass urn, about ashes arranging themselves in patterns that look like deliberate movement. And I think about Gerald Morrison objecting to cremation, being cremated anyway, spending 47 years sealed behind a plaque declaring him peaceful despite everything. I wonder if the seal breaking was his final protest. 47 years of being somewhere he didn't want to be, in a form he didn't want to take, building up enough. What? Anger? Will? Residual consciousness? To finally push through cement and bronze and declare that no, he was not at peace. The seal is repaired now, stronger than before. Gerald Morrison is contained again. The plaque declares him peaceful. The cemetery records show routine maintenance. But I know what I saw. I documented it before we cleaned everything up. I have photographs of that ash trail, those scratch marks, that cement broken outward in a starburst pattern that only makes sense if something was pushing from inside. Section A, Unit 31. I walk past it every day. The seal holds. The plaque gleams. Everything looks exactly as it should. But I wonder if Gerald Morrison is still pushing, still objecting, still refusing the piece that someone inscribed in bronze without asking if he'd actually found it. And I wonder how many other plaques in this cemetery declare peace for people who never wanted what was done to them, who never agreed to the fire, who never found rest despite what their families hoped. Some seals break because they're old. Some break because they were installed poorly. And some break because what's sealed inside refuses to stay contained any longer. Some faces appear in places they shouldn't exist. My name is Nora Castellano, and I have worked as a wall maintenance specialist at Cypress Grove Memorial Park in New Orleans, Louisiana, for 14 years. My responsibilities include cleaning and polishing bronze plaques on our columbarium walls, removing oxidation, restoring shine, maintaining the dignified appearance families expect. The work is meditative in its repetition. Polish, buff, inspect, move to the next one. Until I polished Unit 18 in Section E, I never looked too closely at what reflected back from the bronze. Section E needed its annual deep cleaning, all 48 plaques polished to remove accumulated patina from our humid climate. Unit 18 was a glossy black granite plaque, unusual for our cemetery. Most families chose bronze or marble. The Whitmore family had requested polished black stone for Eleanor Whitmore's memorial, mirror smooth when properly maintained, but prone to showing every fingerprint and water spot. I sprayed cleaning solution and began buffing with a soft cloth. The granite gleamed under morning sun. I worked carefully, using circular motions. As I polished, I saw my own reflection in the black surface, except this reflection showed someone standing behind me. I spun around immediately. The courtyard was empty. I was alone in Section E. The gates wouldn't open to visitors for another hour. I turned back to the plaque, kept polishing, watched my reflection carefully. Alone now, just me and the glossy black surface. I finished polishing and stepped back to inspect. The granite gleamed, then examining the surface from an angle, I saw her again. A woman's face reflected in the polished stone behind where I stood, pale, gaunt, expressionless. I turned around again, still alone. My pulse quickened. I looked back at the plaque. The face was gone. Just my own reflection and the empty courtyard. I told myself it was a trick of light, angle distortion, maybe a cloud formation. Perfectly explainable. I moved to the next plaque and continued working, stayed busy, didn't think about what I'd seen. I finished Section E within 3 hours. As I packed equipment, I made the mistake of glancing back at Eleanor Whitmore's glossy black plaque. The woman's face was there again. Not behind me this time. The reflection showed her standing directly in front of the plaque, where I'd been standing minutes ago, looking outward, staring. I walked closer. The face didn't disappear. It remained visible in the reflection, even as I approached. An elderly woman, thin, with deep-set eyes and hollow cheeks. Expression completely blank. Not sad, not angry, just absent, empty. I reached out and touched the plaque surface. The reflection didn't waver. My hand passed through where the woman's face appeared, but the image persisted, as if she existed in the reflection itself, not behind the plaque, not in front of it, inside the polished surface. I pulled out my phone and photographed the plaque, reviewed the image immediately. The photo showed only my reflection and the empty courtyard, no pale woman, nothing unusual. But when I looked directly at the granite surface, she was still there. I reported to the cemetery office. I need someone to look at the Whitmore plaque. I'm seeing something in the reflection that might be water damage or a flaw in the stone. Director Hayes came down with me. Do you see anything unusual in the reflection? He examined the surface carefully. No, looks perfect. You did excellent work on the polish. Nothing in the reflection, no image, no distortion. Just us and the courtyard. Why? What are you seeing? I looked at the plaque again. The woman's face stared back at me, right there, unmistakable, but Hayes saw nothing. Never mind, I said. Probably just tired. He left. I stood alone in front of Unit 18. The woman remained visible in the reflection. Constant, unwavering, I accessed cemetery records on my phone. Eleanor Whitmore died 2009, aged 78, cremated, interred here in Section E. No unusual notations, but there was a note attached to the visitor log. Multiple complaints from family members over the years. Uncomfortable atmosphere near Unit 18. Strange feeling when visiting Mother's Memorial. Please check if plaque is installed correctly. Something feels wrong. Vague discomfort that multiple visitors had reported over 15 years. I visited the cemetery's historical photo archive, found installation photos from 2009. Eleanor Whitmore's plaque being mounted. The glossy black granite gleaming in sunlight. And there, visible in the reflection, captured by the installation photographer, the same pale, gaunt face, the same expressionless woman staring outward from the polished surface. She'd been there from the beginning, since the day the plaque was installed. 15 years of reflecting something that shouldn't exist. I showed the historical photo to Director Hayes. Look at the reflection. Do you see her? He studied the image closely. I see the installer's reflection. Some trees, the sky. What am I supposed to be seeing? The woman, the pale face, right there in the center. He looked at me with concern. Nora, there's no one there except the installer. Are you feeling all right? I realized then that whatever I was seeing it alone. Hayes couldn't perceive it. The camera couldn't capture it. But when I looked at Eleanor Whitmore's plaque, either physical or photographs, the woman's face was always present. Over the following weeks, I researched Eleanor Whitmore, found her obituary. Devoted wife and mother, preceded in death by daughter Catherine, who passed tragically in 1974. I found Catherine Whitmore's obituary, age 16, died in a house fire. I found a photograph of Catherine from a newspaper article about the fire. Catherine Whitmore at 16, pale complexion, gaunt features, deep-set eyes, exactly matching the face I saw reflected in her mother's memorial plaque. Not Eleanor in the reflection. Catherine, the daughter who'd died 35 years before her mother, the daughter who'd burned. I visited Unit 18 again, stood in front of the glossy black plaque. Catherine's face stared back from the reflection, still expressionless, still empty. "Why are you here?" I asked quietly. The reflection didn't change. I tried different approaches over the following days, spoke to the reflection, left offerings, researched the Whitmore family history. Nothing changed. Catherine's face remained visible in the polished granite, unchanging and perpetual. Then a mourner visited, an elderly woman I'd seen occasionally. She approached Unit 18, placed flowers, and stood quietly. When she turned to leave, she stopped beside me. "You see her too," she said. Not a question. "You can see her?" "I've seen her since the day Eleanor was interred. The old woman who watches from the wall. I thought I was the only one." She paused. "I'm Susan Whitmore, Eleanor's sister, Catherine's aunt. Do you know why she's there? Why Catherine's reflection appears in Eleanor's plaque?" Susan looked at the glossy black granite. "Eleanor blamed herself for Catherine's death. The fire started in the kitchen. Eleanor had been cooking, got distracted, left the stove unattended. Catherine was asleep upstairs. By the time Eleanor realized what happened, it was too late. So Eleanor carried guilt, profound guilt, for 35 years, every day until she died. She used to say she could still see Catherine in mirrors, in windows, in any reflective surface, always watching, always reminding her of what she'd let happen. And now Catherine's reflection is in Eleanor's memorial. Maybe that's fitting. Eleanor saw Catherine in reflections her entire life after the fire. Now they're together in the same reflection, mother and daughter, fire and guilt, forever caught in polished stone. Susan placed her hand on the plaque. "I asked to be buried somewhere else when my time comes. I don't want to spend eternity watching them watch each other. Some grief doesn't end with death." She left. I stayed with Unit 18, looked at Catherine's face in the polished surface, understood finally that this wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense. This was memory made visible, guilt transformed into permanent reflection, a mother's psychological burden manifesting as her daughter's face in every polished surface, continuing even now in the memorial meant to mark Eleanor's rest. I still maintain Section E, still polish Eleanor Whitmore's plaque annually. Catherine's face is always there in the reflection. Some visitors see her, most don't, because some things exist in the space between perception and reality. Some reflections show not what is, but what never stopped being seen. And some mothers never escape the faces they carry in their minds, even when reduced to ash and sealed behind glossy black granite that reflects their guilt back to anyone capable of seeing it. Some messages are carved where they'll never be seen. My name is Hugh Brennan, and I have worked as a plaque installer at Stonebridge Memorial Cemetery in Burlington, Vermont for 16 years. My job involves replacing damaged or deteriorated plaques with new bronze castings, removing old installations, preparing niche openings, mounting fresh plaques according to exact specifications. Every plaque must be in spolone facing outward, engraving visible, properly aligned. You'd have to deliberately reverse a plaque to install it backwards. Until I arrived at Unit 27 in Section G, I'd never seen anyone make that mistake. The work order was straightforward. Replace a cracked bronze plaque from a 1995 installation. The original had developed a vertical fracture, likely from thermal stress during our harsh winters. I arrived at Unit 27 early on a Tuesday morning. The plaque should have read, Margaret Louise Hartley, Forever in Our Hearts, April 9th, 1942 to September 3rd, 1995. But I couldn't read it because the plaque was installed backwards. The smooth bronze back faced outward, the engraving faced inward toward the sealed niche compartment, completely reversed. I checked my work order again. Section G, Row 4, Unit 27, correct location, but impossible installation. No one would mount a plaque backwards. The engraving is the entire point. I documented the error with photographs and called my supervisor. The plaque is mounted backwards, has been since '95, apparently. That's not possible. Every installation gets inspected. I'm looking at it right now. Smooth bronze facing out. The engraving is on the interior side. Director Morrison arrived within 20 minutes. I showed him the backwards plaque. This was inspected, he said quietly. Someone verified this was mounted correctly in '95. Then how is it backwards? I don't know. We accessed the cemetery's digital archives, found installation photos from September 1995, clear images showing the plaque being mounted, and in every photograph the engraving faced outward, properly installed. It was installed correctly, Morrison said. These photos prove it. Then someone reversed it. Without authorization, that would require removing the plaque, rotating it, and remounting it. Why? We examined the mounting hardware. The screws showed age-appropriate weathering. They hadn't been recently disturbed. Remove it, Morrison said. We need to see the interior side. I carefully extracted the mounting screws. They came out easily. I lifted the bronze plaque away and turned it over to reveal the engraved side. The surface showed the expected text. Margaret Louise Hartley, Forever in Our Hearts, April 9th, 1942 to September 3rd, 1995. But beneath the formal inscription, crudely scratched into the bronze in irregular, desperate letters, were two words, Help me. Morrison and I stared at the scratched message. Someone had carved it after the initial engraving. After installation, the scratches were deep, made with significant force. Check the compartment, Morrison said quietly. I directed my flashlight into the open niche. The urn sat on its marble shelf, standard brass vessel, but the interior walls showed marks, scratches, dozens of them. Desperate, repetitive scraping, like someone clawing at marble and bronze from inside the sealed space. I photographed everything. Then I examined the urn itself. The lid showed damage. The seal had been broken from inside, the wax fractured outward, and on the interior rim, more scratches. Pull the complete file, Morrison said. Death certificate, cremation authorization, everything. I reviewed Margaret Hartley's documentation. She'd died at age 53. Cause of death, acute respiratory failure. Found deceased in her home, cremated 3 days later, but attached to the file was a letter from her daughter, dated 2 months after interment, a complaint about the installation. The plaque looks wrong. Please verify it was installed correctly. The cemetery's response assured the daughter everything had been inspected. The installation was correct. Her concerns were likely grief related, except the daughter had been right. The plaque was backwards, and nobody had investigated thoroughly enough to discover it. I showed Morrison the correspondence. The daughter knew something was wrong. Should we contact her now? I searched current records, found Linda Hartley Bishop listed as next of kin, still local. I called her number. After 3 rings, she answered. I explained who I was and why I was calling. Long silence. You found it, she finally said. You found what was wrong. The plaque is reversed, has been since installation. I knew it. Everyone told me I was imagining things, that grief was affecting my perception. Ms. Hartley Bishop, there are words scratched into the reverse side. Help me. Do you know why? Another silence. What do you mean scratched? Someone carved the words into the bronze on the side facing the niche interior. That's impossible. The plaque was engraved professionally. The reverse side, the side that's been facing the wall. My mother scratched those words. How could she? She was cremated before the plaque was installed. I know that doesn't make sense, but my mother was terrified of cremation. She'd made me promise I wouldn't let them burn her. She wanted traditional burial, but when she died, my brother had power of attorney. He overrode her wishes, said cremation was cheaper. So she was cremated against her stated preferences, against her desperate, repeated, explicitly documented preferences. And when I visited her niche, I always felt like she was trying to tell me something, like she was backwards, reversed, wrong somehow. The plaque has been facing the wrong direction since installation. Your mother's name has been facing inward, hidden. Linda's breathing became audible, like she was erased, like my brother erased her by going against her wishes, and then the plaque erased her again by hiding her name. We're replacing the plaque today, installing it correctly. Your mother's name will face outward, as it should have from the beginning. What about the scratches, the words she carved? I looked at the reversed plaque with its desperate plea. We can preserve them if you want, add them to the new plaque, or keep them separately. No, Linda said firmly, don't preserve them. She shouldn't have had to carve those words. Let the new plaque be clean. Let it just have her name, the way it should have been from the start. We installed the new plaque that afternoon, engraving facing outward, Margaret Hartley's name visible. I inspected it 3 times to ensure alignment was correct. The old plaque, with its backwards installation and scratched plea, was removed from cemetery property. The scratched words, "Help me," disappeared when the bronze was melted down. But I documented everything first. Photographs, measurements, the complete story of how a woman was cremated against her wishes, installed backwards, and spent 30 years with her name hidden while she scratched messages nobody could see. I think about it constantly, about how Margaret Hartley's plaque was installed correctly in '95. The photos prove it. But somehow, at some point, it reversed. Her name disappearing, her memorial becoming invisible, and I think about those scratches covering the niche interior, the broken seal on the urn, the words carved desperately into bronze. A woman who died asking not to be burned, burned anyway, and then spent 3 decades facing the wrong direction. Linda Hartley Bishop visits her mother's memorial regularly now. The new plaque gleams. The engraving is clear, everything properly oriented. She touches the bronze gently, speaks quietly, then leaves. She never mentioned the backwards installation to other family members, never told them about the scratched plea, just quietly acknowledged that something had been wrong and now it's right. Unit 27, Section G. The plaque faces outward now. Margaret Hartley's name is visible. Everything is exactly as it should be. But I walk past that niche carefully, respectfully, remembering that for 30 years, a woman's name faced the wrong direction while she tried desperately to make someone understand that she needed help, that something was backwards, that she'd been erased and nobody was listening. Some compartments hold more than they're supposed to. My name is Gia Moreno, and I have worked as a restoration lead at Willowbrook Memorial Gardens in Portland, Maine for 21 years. I specialize in companion niche maintenance, double width compartments designed for married couples who want to be interred together. The work is emotionally significant. These niches represent lifelong partnerships, decades of marriage, promises kept even after death. Until I opened Companion Unit 42 in Section D, I'd never questioned what together meant in the context of cremated remains. Section D needed structural assessment of all companion niches installed before 2000. Standard preservation work. I'd inspected 30 companion units without finding significant problems. Unit 42 was different. The bronze plaque showed two names, Thomas and Elizabeth Porter, together forever, married September 2nd, 1957. Installation date, November 1998. Both had died within months of each other, Thomas in June 98, Elizabeth in September 98. Classic companion arrangement. I removed the plaque carefully and directed my flashlight into the double-width compartment. Two urns sat side by side on the marble shelf, exactly as they should be, matching brass vessels, and a third urn wedged behind them, smaller, ceramic rather than brass. No nameplate, just a plain white vessel pushed into the narrow space between the two official urns and the back wall. I stopped breathing. Companion niches were for two people, two urns maximum. The presence of a third was a critical documentation error or an unauthorized interment. I photographed everything. Then I carefully moved the two brass urns forward and accessed the ceramic vessel. It was heavier than its size suggested, definitely containing cremains. Sealed, I lifted it out into the light. No markings, no inscription, just smooth white ceramic and a simple lid, but engraved on the bottom in small, barely visible letters, the one they forgot. My hands shook. I set the urn down and called my supervisor. I have a serious problem at Companion Unit 42. There's an unauthorized third urn in a two-person compartment. Director Walsh arrived within 15 minutes. I showed him the three urns, two brass, one ceramic, all containing cremains. Check the records, Walsh said immediately. I pulled the Porter file, installation records from November 98 showed two urns, Thomas Anderson Porter and Elizabeth Marie Porter, both cremated, both delivered by Riverside Crematory. No mention of a third urn, no authorization, nothing explaining the ceramic vessel. Walsh examined the ceramic urn carefully. This engraving, the one they forgot, what does that mean? I don't know, but someone placed this here deliberately. Check if the Porters had any family members die around the same time. Maybe a child, maybe someone close enough to warrant inclusion. I searched cemetery records. The Porters had no children interred here, no siblings, no parents, no other family members with death dates near 98. I expanded to obituary records, found Thomas Porter's death notice from June 98, preceded in death by his beloved wife, Elizabeth. But Elizabeth had died in September, 3 months after Thomas. Elizabeth's obituary said, preceded in death by her beloved husband, Thomas. But Thomas had died first. The obituaries contradicted each other. Impossible unless the dates were wrong. Pull the death certificates, Walsh said. I accessed state vital records. Thomas Anderson Porter died June 12th, 1998. Elizabeth Marie Porter died June 13th, 1998. 1 day apart, not months. The obituaries are wrong, I said. They died within 24 hours of each other. What were the causes? Thomas, acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. Elizabeth, cause of death listed as undetermined pending investigation. Investigation status, closed, no foul play visibly indicated. Elizabeth's death was investigated, Walsh observed. I searched newspaper archives, found a brief article. Local woman dies 1 day after husband's fatal heart attack. Police investigate but find no evidence of foul play. Family reports she was distraught. Distraught. That was the only detail. Elizabeth had been devastated by Thomas's death. Died the next day. Investigation closed. I found Elizabeth's death certificate with more detail. Place of death, residential address, manner, undetermined. Contributing factors, found deceased, no apparent trauma, possible cardiac event related to acute psychological stress, not confirmed, just possible, because they couldn't explain why a healthy woman died exactly 1 day after her husband. Walsh was examining the ceramic urn again. This is lighter than the brass urns. Feel the weight difference. He was right. The Porter urns felt appropriately heavy, but the ceramic urn was noticeably lighter, as if it contained less. Maybe it's partial cremation, I suggested. Then why hide it? Why wedge it behind the official urns without documentation? I didn't have an answer. Walsh made a decision. Contact the Porter family. Find out if they know about this third urn. I located the next of kin. Robert Porter, nephew, local. I called and explained the situation. Mr. Porter, we're performing maintenance on your aunt and uncle's niche, and we've discovered an unexpected urn. Do you know if anyone else was supposed to be interred with them? Long pause. What kind of urn? Ceramic, white, smaller than the two brass urns, no nameplate. Another silence. That's Amy. Amy, Elizabeth's sister. She lived with them. She died the same day Thomas did, same heart attack. They were found together. Thomas in the living room, Amy in the kitchen, both dead from cardiac arrest within minutes of each other. I looked at Walsh. Our records only show Thomas and Elizabeth. There's no documentation of Amy because Elizabeth refused to acknowledge it, refused to accept that Amy had died. When they found Thomas and Amy both dead, Elizabeth just denied it, insisted Amy was fine, insisted only Thomas had died. She was completely irrational about it. But Amy's body was cremated quietly by other family members. Elizabeth was so distraught, so broken by Thomas's death, that we didn't force her to confront Amy's death too. We held a separate, very small cremation service. We didn't tell Elizabeth. And Elizabeth died the next day. Yes, we think the stress, losing Thomas, denying Amy's death, it caused her heart to fail. She died still believing Amy was alive somewhere. So who put Amy's urn in the companion niche? Robert Porter exhaled slowly. I did, after Elizabeth's cremation, before the niche was sealed. I brought Amy's urn to the cemetery and asked the funeral director to place it behind Thomas and Elizabeth's urns. I told him it was something the family wanted. He didn't ask questions. Why hide it? Why not document it? Because Elizabeth spent her last day on earth denying Amy's death. I couldn't bear the thought of Elizabeth being sealed away with that denial, so I made sure Amy was there, with them, together, even if nobody knew. The three of them had lived together for 40 years. Amy deserved to be with them. The engraving on the bottom, the one they forgot, I had that added, because Amy was forgotten, erased from the official story. Elizabeth forgot her, psychologically couldn't accept her death. The cemetery records forgot her, but she existed. She died, and she deserved to be remembered, even if only in a secret engraving nobody would see. Walsh and I exchanged glances, wildly irregular, unauthorized interment, undocumented remains, but done with love. What do you want us to do, Mr. Porter? I asked. Leave her there, he said without hesitation. She's been with Thomas and Elizabeth for 26 years. That's where she belongs. Even if the plaque only shows 2 names, Amy knows she's there. That's enough. We resealed Companion Unit 42 that afternoon, placed the 2 brass Porter urns side by side, wedged Amy's small ceramic urn behind them, exactly where Robert had originally placed it. The bronze plaque still reads, Thomas and Elizabeth Porter, together forever. Only 2 names. But behind the official memorial, in the hidden space between brass urns and marble wall, the one they forgot remains. I documented everything in my personal files, not in official records. That would require explaining an unauthorized interment from 26 years ago. But I kept the photographs, the measurements, Robert Porter's explanation. Because some people get forgotten, sometimes deliberately, sometimes through psychological denial, sometimes through bureaucratic oversight. But they deserve to be somewhere. They deserve to rest with the people they loved, even if their names aren't on the plaques. Companion Unit 42 holds 3 people now. The plaque says 2. The records say 2. But I know there are 3. Thomas, who died first. Elizabeth, who couldn't accept her sister's death and died the next day. And Amy, the one they forgot, resting in the space between official truth and secret reality, finally acknowledged by someone who remembered she deserved to be there. Some doors refuse to close. My name is Ezra Coleman, and I have worked as a wall installation technician at Riverside Memorial Park in Spokane, Washington for 15 years. My job involves securing bronze plaques to columbarium niches, drilling, mounting, sealing, ensuring permanent installation that will last decades. The work is straightforward and reliable. You use proper hardware, you follow tested procedures, the plaques stay mounted. Until I tried to seal Unit 31A, I'd never encountered a plaque that refused to stay closed. The installation was standard. New cremation. Mr. David Leonard Fisher, aged 67, died October 2nd, 2023. His family had selected a single niche in Section A. I'd received the urn that morning, standard brass vessel, properly sealed, and scheduled the installation for afternoon. I placed David Fisher's urn in the niche compartment at 2 in the afternoon, centered it on the marble shelf, verified stability. Then I positioned the bronze plaque over the opening and aligned the mounting holes. I drove the first screw. It threaded smoothly. I moved to the second screw. Same result. By 3 o'clock, all 4 mounting screws were secure and the plaque was sealed. I stepped back to inspect. The plaque was level. The seal was tight. Everything looked perfect. The next morning, I received a call from the ground supervisor. Ezra, you need to check your work on Unit 31A. The plaque is loose. That's impossible. I installed it yesterday afternoon. I'm looking at it right now. All 4 screws are stripped. The plaque is hanging at an angle. I returned to Section A immediately. The supervisor was right. The plaque I'd securely mounted less than 24 hours ago was tilted, hanging from one partially engaged screw. The other 3 mounting holes showed stripped threads. I removed the failed hardware and inspected the mounting holes. The threads were destroyed, unusable. I'd have to drill new holes. I repositioned the plaque, marked new mounting locations, and drilled fresh holes. Used larger screws, higher grade hardware. When I finished, the plaque was rock solid. I left at 5, confident the installation was secure. The following morning, the plaque was loose again. Different screws, same result. All 4 mounting points had failed. This time I brought my supervisor, Martin Walsh. I showed him the failed installation, the stripped mounting holes. Use industrial adhesive, Walsh said. Epoxy the plaque in place. I mixed 2-part industrial epoxy, the kind used for permanent stone bonding, applied it to the plaque back, positioned it over the niche opening, and held pressure for 10 minutes. The bond was immediate and powerful. I returned the next morning. The plaque had separated. The epoxy bond had failed. The adhesive was still attached to the plaque, but it had torn free from the marble facing, as if something had pushed the plaque outward with enough force to break an industrial-grade bond. I showed Walsh the failed adhesive. That epoxy should hold 500 pounds. What kind of force broke this bond? I don't know, but I'm starting to think the problem isn't with your installation technique. What do you mean? I mean, maybe the plaque doesn't want to stay sealed. Walsh gave me a long look. Plaques don't want anything. They're bronze and marble. Then explain 3 consecutive installation failures. He couldn't. We agreed to try one more method, welding. We brought in a specialist who used a microtorch to weld small points where the bronze contacted the marble frame. 4 fusion points, molecular bonding. That'll hold, the specialist assured us. That's permanent. 6 hours later, the weld points had cracked, all 4. The plaque was loose again. I returned to Section A after dark, alone, stood in front of Unit 31A, and stared at the loose bronze plaque. 5 installation attempts, 5 failures. What do you want? I said aloud. The cemetery was silent. Then I heard it. A voice, quiet, calm, coming from inside the niche. I'd rather you didn't. I stepped back. Mr. Fisher, the door. I'd rather you didn't seal it. I should have run. But instead, I asked, why? I don't like closed spaces, never have. The thought of being sealed away, it troubles me. I'd prefer the door stay open. That's not how this works. The niche has to be sealed. I understand, but I'm asking anyway. Please leave it open. I stood there, having a conversation with a dead man's voice. I can't leave it unsealed. Your family expects proper interment. Then make it look sealed from a distance, but leave a gap. Let me see out. Let me hear. Don't close me into complete darkness. Why do you care? You're dead. You're cremated. But I am aware, I am conscious, and I am asking you, please don't seal the door. I pulled out my phone and accessed David Fisher's file. Standard death, standard cremation, but there was a note from the funeral home. Deceased expressed specific final wishes. Wanted viewing to be open casket, no closed coffin. Family honored this request despite cremation decision. David Fisher had wanted openness, even in death, and his final preference was the same. Don't close him in. If I leave it open, I said carefully, how do I explain 5 installation failures? You don't. You report that Unit 31A shows recurring seal failure due to unknown structural issues. You recommend it remain temporarily open pending engineering assessment. You buy time. Eventually, people forget to follow up. He'd thought this through, had an answer ready. What if I seal it anyway? I asked. Silence. Then, you could try. Keep using stronger methods. Eventually, something might hold. But I'll keep pushing back. Keep breaking seals. Keep refusing closure. Or you could just leave it open and move on to your other work. He was right. I could fight this forever, or accept what was happening. Why can you do this? I asked. How does consciousness in ashes generate physical force? I don't know. I don't understand it either, but I'm here, I'm aware, and I'm asking, human to human, please let me stay open. I thought about it for a long time, about my professional responsibilities, about cemetery standards, about the 5 failed installations. I'll leave it open, I said finally. I'll document it as a structural issue, but the plaque stays loosely in place, looks sealed from a distance. Thank you, the voice said. Genuinely, thank you. I positioned the plaque over Unit 31A without fastening it. It rested against the niche opening, held by gravity alone. From 10 feet away, It looked properly installed. I documented the installation as pending engineering review due to recurring seal failure and moved on. That was 2 years ago. Unit 31A still has its loose plaque, still technically unsealed. I check it monthly. The plaque remains in position. David Fisher apparently keeps it there himself, maintaining the appearance while ensuring he's not completely closed in. His family visits occasionally. They never touch the plaque, so they never discover it's loose. They place flowers. They speak quietly. They leave believing their father is properly interred. But I know the truth. David Fisher refused to be sealed, broke every fastening method I tried, negotiated for openness, and got it. I still install plaques, still seal niches. Most stay closed without incident, but I think about Unit 31A every time. I think about David Fisher maintaining his loose door, and I wonder how many other sealed niches contain people who would have preferred to stay open but didn't have enough will to prevent their own sealing. Some doors refuse to close because the people behind them refuse to accept darkness. Some plaques won't seal because the dead still have preferences. And sometimes, the most professional thing you can do is recognize when you're fighting against something that won't yield and walk away, knowing that what looks sealed might be deliberately, permanently open.